Cool Feel Good TV. Revolutionary salute. Revolutionary salute. Like, share, subscribe. Welcome to the House of Revolution. You know I'm your humble host, the Yao Ming of Revolution. I got a World War III alert. We have a World War III alert. First, be sure to wipe your feet. That means hit the like button. You in the House of Revolution. Like, share, subscribe. Let everybody know we have another live going on. U.S. is under attack in Iraq. The Iraqis want them gone anyway. Their air defense systems didn't help them. I think this is the beginning of the all-out attack on the imperialists. I had to come bring y'all this information. Let's get right into this.
Actually, it's coming in now from the Pentagon because we're just learning from our team that 2 rockets have been fired at an airbase in Iraq, according to 2 defense officials. And we have now learned that several Americans have been hurt. Courtney Kuby is standing by. She's gotten to a camera there at the Pentagon. What else do we know, Court?
Yeah, there's not a whole lot more. Now, we first got word of this possible rocket attack about 2 hours ago. It's in, as you mentioned, it's Al-Assad Air Base. It's in Anbar Province, which is west of Baghdad. You can see it there. It's considered Western Iraq, even though it's sort of central, but considered Western Iraq. We know at least 2 rockets were fired at this base, and then we know at least one of them impacted the base. And as you mentioned, we're getting reports that several Americans were injured. We don't have a whole lot of fidelity on the nature of those injuries beyond the fact that there were injuries involved. Now, keep in mind, there are a number of different Iranian-backed militia groups that operate in that area. And despite the fact it doesn't make the news every day, Hallie, they do frequently, on a nearly daily basis, try to fire off projectiles, often rockets and other things, at bases, both at Al-Assad and at other bases in Iraq, housing American troops. The majority of those projectiles are generally knocked down, Hallie, and we'll bring you more as we learn anything more about the severity or nature of these injuries.
Because the other piece of this, Court, is that
the other piece of this is they don't want you there. They want you out of their country, just like the Africans. America is refusing to go. The troops shouldn't be there. You're not fighting ISIS. You are the ISIS to these people.
The Middle East, there's so many around the world are sort of waiting now with breath held for any kind of response to what we have seen now with these attacks that have been blamed on Israel that have happened in the region as a response to obviously what happened on October 7th.
Love family.
Exactly. And so, and one of the questions has been, what could a possible Iranian retaliation or response look like? And many people, experts, believe that it will involve some of these Iranian-backed proxy groups in Iraq and Syria, other groups that are located down in Yemen. We hear about the Houthis, that they may play a part in any retaliation or response. But so far, officials do not believe that this is sort of the beginning of that sort of any kind of retaliation.
Yes, it is.
Courtney Kuby, we'll let you get back to work on the phones. Please bring us any.
See, they come on here and tell y'all anything. This is absolutely the beginning to the all-out attack. They just was testing to see if the Americans was sleeping or they woke, and they failed the damn test, man. You heard Iran say it's finna be all out, is hell to pay. And you slipping on the base, they don't even want you there. Revolutionary salute, family salute, queen. How can the U.S. have got caught slipping? But we're going to get into the information after we hear enough of what happened today. America attacked an Iraqi base 4 days ago. 4 days ago and killed some people. So this is really like a retaliation for that. But we also going to look at these people have told the U.S., go. We don't want you here. They signed agreements. They just had meetings in America. They don't want you here. No U.S. troops should be able to get attacked in Iraq. They're not supposed to even be there.
All right, we have some breaking news in the Middle East. The Pentagon is confirming to News Nation that a rocket attack hit outside the Al-Assad Air Base in western Iraq, injuring several American personnel who were stationed there. It's unclear at this moment who launched the attack, but it does look to be launched by Iranian proxies. President Biden has been briefed.
That's a lie. Should they come on to the lady just said she don't know who launched it, but it do look like it was launched by Iranian proxies. Ma'am, you just said you don't know who launched it, but you want to throw an Iran name in there. No, ma'am, it's not Iran. You were attacked by Iraqi freedom fighters who want you out of their country. They say you are an imperialist. You're trying to steal their wealth. This is not Iran. Iraq is attacking you. You see, the U.S. would never want to admit that because Iraq got the right to attack them. They're illegally in their country, and they've been telling them to get the hell out. We're going to get into that.
quote, "We are monitoring the developments." This news, of course, comes as Israel is on high alert, bracing for a large-scale attack from Iran and or its proxies, if not properly calibrated, of course. This could all throw the United States and the wider region into bloody conflict. Just hours ago, Israel announced that it conducted a strike in southern Lebanon, killing another high-ranking Hezbollah commander.
They're gonna pay for
this
it.
comes hours after the Lebanese militant group launched its own drone attack on northern Israel that injured 2 Israeli troops. Israel says the death of that Hezbollah terrorist will now, quote, "severely disrupt the group's ability to target them."
That's a lie.
You
see how they repeat that propaganda? Israel said the killing of a Hezbollah commander will affect Hezbollah. No, it won't. They got plenty of commanders and they ready to step up. You don't. None of that's going to work, man. That's not going to work. It's not none of that. Chop the head off the snake. You may have a more radical person step up to the plate. No, Israel and the U.S. and they don't got to face they fear a real war, like the days of the Arab invasion. No, they got to face all of these people together now. And Iran been checking the hell out of puppet nations. They check Saudi Arabia, they check Jordan, they check Kuwait, they check United Arab Emirates, and they told them, we finna attack. And if you do anything, you getting attacked. And that's serious business. Those Arab nations, those puppet nations, scared to death right now.
Today, as President Biden held a high-stakes meeting with his national security team at the White House Situation Room, the White House is urging de-escalation as the Pentagon is increasing its military presence in the region, moving the USS Abraham Lincoln Carrier Strike Group to the Middle East.
That can get hit too.
Movements come as Iran has vowed, quote, severe punishment against Israel after last week's assassination of a Hamas leader inside Tehran. The exiled leader was reportedly blown up by a bomb that was planted under his bed in an Iranian Revolutionary Guard guest house. Israel has not officially claimed responsibility, but the Hamas chief's death came just hours after Israel did claim responsibility for a strike in Beirut that killed a top Hezbollah commander. The message from the State Department today to all parties involved: take a step back. Escalation is in no one's interest.
Yes, yes, it is in the interest of people who want peace on this earth. I reckon the talk ain't no backing down. We finna have what everybody been wanting to have, this talk, this World War III talk. It's gonna be World War III if they don't want to get into this. But the U.S. is pretending like they want peace. Well, they should have told Israel stop assassinating people, but they didn't tell them, so now they got to pay.
We're at a critical moment for the region, and it is important that all parties take steps over the coming days to refrain from escalation and calm tensions. Escalation is in no one's interest. It's not in the interest of any one country. It's not in the interest of the region. And it's certainly not in the interest of the millions of civilians who just want to live their lives free from violence and conflict.
All right, let's discuss all this now with our panel. Joining me is retired U.S. Army Major Mike Lyons, and David Tarfori is a former State Department official who also served as an Obama.
I don't want to hear from them. They're just going to tell a bunch of lies. Nah, I don't want to hear none of that nonsense that them two liars from them come on there and talk about. So let's hear a little bit more about this attack on the U.S. base, the humiliation from the West. Why didn't the air defenses work, man? Why you didn't shoot it down? Why is U.S. troops injured right now? Limbs probably missing. You know, so we want to bring our troops home, man. Why are they over there? We don't want them watching over those stolen oil, man. We do not want them part of looting and all that type of shit. Bring our troops home.
All right, we have some breaking news. We're now learning that the U.S. Department of Defense has confirmed a suspected rocket attack has apparently injured American troops stationed in Iraq. A Pentagon spokesperson says that the attack targeted U.S. and coalition forces at the Al-Assad Air Base, apparently injuring several U.S. personnel. The Pentagon reports a damage assessment is currently underway. I want to bring in our ABC News senior Pentagon reporter, Louis Martinez. He's joining us now from the Pentagon with more on this. So, Louis, look, I know that this is early, but what other information do we have about this attack here?
Keno, we are learning from U.S. and Iraqi officials that there are at least 2 rockets that were fired at the Al-Assad base. Now, this is a sprawling base in western Iraq. It's frequently under attack over the last year and a half, especially since what happened is over there in Israel between Hamas and Israel. Now, one of the things that we've seen here is that we are getting initial indications that several American personnel were injured. Now, this is quite different than the norm, because typically when these incidents occur, we get word that there were very few casualties, if any. Typically, the rockets either don't reach the base, or if they do, there are no injuries. But in this case, a notch above, which is why this is very noteworthy, and it's very notable to figure out exactly what's going to be the next step, because last week the United States retaliated against one of those militia groups as they were preparing to launch missiles or rockets from an area southwest of Baghdad.
That's called propaganda. How can you retaliate on somebody if you striking them first? You see, if somebody is in their country and they want you gone, how can you retaliate against them? You see, this is called propaganda. No, you attack those Iraqis for no reason at all. They just want you gone. So what you getting is called the retaliation, brother. Stop the propaganda. You're being retaliated on for killing innocent Iraqi people. They want you out the goddamn country. If you leave the country, no Iraqi person will ever attack another American because they don't want to come over here. You need to leave their country.
And that followed a recent series of about 2 incidents in 1 week where those Iranian-backed militia groups had fired at U.S. bases. Those attacks were the first ones since April.
Not Iranian-backed. That's nonsense. That's called propaganda. Iraqi freedom fighters. See, when we mention Ukraine, we don't say U.S.-backed. No, y'all don't. Y'all say the Ukrainian military. Well, these are the Iraqi militias that are fighting you, not Iranian-backed, brother. Give Iraqis their credit. They are fighting you.
April, and the ones in April were the first since back in February. And back in February, like almost daily attacks in Iraq and Syria stopped following U.S. airstrikes. So the question now becomes, how will the United States military respond? And based on past practice, I think it is very likely that we may see some kind of a retaliatory strike. However, given the climate right now and what's happening between Iran and Israel, and whether Iran will retaliate potentially against Israel because of the assassination of the Hamas leader in Tehran, I think things have to be seen through a different prism. And I think that's something that the U.S. leaders will definitely look at.
Right. We know from the G7, Louis, we're hearing things like we urge all involved parties to once again refrain from perpetuating the current destructive cycle of
Israel. Listen, G7, Joe Biden, NATO, urge Israel, the Middle East. The Arab puppets, they don't matter no more. The Iranian and the resistance fighters, they're not listening to y'all. Iran already told y'all that y'all can go to World War III. They finna get busy. Just come on out there, meet them on the battlefield. They already told y'all that. Why y'all coming on TV and telling us to refrain? No, you said refrain. Iran say gave you the middle finger, and then somebody just attacked your base in Iraq. Now you coming on TV snitching. Why you not handling business?
Retaliatory violence. But when you hear this, Louis, and now we have American servicemen and women potentially injured here, I'm curious how you're assessing this responsibility.
Is that propaganda? Not potentially injured, ma'am. You already told us they injured. They are injured. No, potentially they might be dead. I hope they not. They might be concussed, leg missing, arm. They might have lost the eye. We don't know the severity of a rocket attack, man. This is a rocket attack, man. What type of injuries do you get in a rocket attack, man? So you can play it down if you want to, but that's not a rumor. They were attacked. Air defenses didn't work. Ooh-wee.
Heavy word. We don't know who, but we know that we've been seeing, our forces go up against these Iranian proxies, but there's also Iranian-backed militia groups in both Iraq and Syria. Any speculation that they're responsible here?
Typically, they look at one particular group called Kataib Hezbollah. They're the group that has been prominently backed by Iran. They are the ones that were most responsible for the more than 170 attacks against U.S. personnel, both in Iraq and Syria, since last October. And so when the United States looks at this, they look and try to figure out who launched the attack, whether they are backed by Iran. And then in this case, most prominently, it will be, and most likely it will be Kataib Hezbollah. Now, again, the United States has responded in the past militarily against Kataib Hezbollah, launching strikes. And one of the main reasons why those dozens and dozens of attacks stopped back in early February was because the United States launched a high-profile attack against a senior leader of the militia group, and that strike followed those big retaliatory strikes that we saw after the deaths of 3 American soldiers inside of Syria at Tower 22. So these would be the first American casualties since that incident, and I think we kind of have to look at it again. Is this going to trigger another U.S. military response against these militia groups?
Go, it's tit for tat, man. What you mean is you're going to trigger a response? No, they're telling you they want to fight you, bro. So U.S. military, they need to get out of them bases. The people outside, they're waiting on you. They want to talk to you. They told you, get out of their goddamn country. You refusing to go. Imagine people telling you, what will we do? If we want the immigrants to go right now. The people want you out of their country, America. And if you don't want to go, then this is what they willing to do to you.
Michael Hanlon is the Director of Research and Foreign Policy at the Brookings Institute and joins us now. How many times can Iran ignore the United States, hurt American troops, attack our allies before there has to be a meaningful response, not from the Israelis, but from the United States?
Well, it's an excellent question. I think Iran has figured out that the kind of back and forth it tends to engage in, it can control. And as you imply, I think
Iran figured out that you lost to the Taliban, who didn't have no tanks, no plane, no missiles, no rockets, they barely had shoes. So I think Iran really don't give a damn about nothing that the U.S. talking about. You just was attacked, man.
Question: the United States will do something specific by way of retaliation, but nothing that hurts Iran too much. Partly because we don't want to go to the next level ourselves. The question is, does the pride of the various parties involved here now require them to do something that, in a sense, their realpolitik calculus tells them they should not do? So if Hezbollah, and Iran via Hezbollah hits 20 Israeli targets and, heaven forbid, kills 3 people, that's sort of a way for Iran to do something but show some degree of restraint. But if Iran does what they did in April, and some of those 300 plus weapons get through, then Iran is requiring Israel and maybe even the United States to take another step forward and escalate ourselves. The United States.
You make a great point, right? Which is there's a calculus on both sides. And when you look at that picture of Kamala Harris and President Biden together in the Situation Room, Iran knows that America does not want, or I should say, the Biden administration does not want any escalation, because they know what it means politically. They want a ceasefire in Gaza. That they think their only hope politically moving forward. Given that Iran knows that, Israel knows that, Israel feels that it's isolated and therefore has to be more aggressive. At what point does the United States almost become, I don't want to say irrelevant, but appearing to be leading from behind, impotent? What's the right word?
Well, leading from behind is not a bad phrase. And, in a sense, you could say that's what presidents have been doing in the United States for 30 plus years, because there's really no American who's gone out of his way as president to try to have this fight with Iran. Take, for example, George W. Bush. He had his doctrine of preemption, but at a time the United States essentially controlled Iraq. He prevented Israel from attacking Iranian nuclear facilities. And he said, no, I still think diplomacy is a better option. I don't want an escalating Middle East conflict. So you're right to ask the question, but the interesting thing is that it's actually been American presidents of both parties who for a long time have not seen any particular reason to want to get into this kind of a war. But at some point, you get pushed to the threshold where you can't just do the same thing. And that's what everybody's nervous about. So you're right to raise the question. At some point, it's going to feel like we're not doing enough. And you're right, election year dynamics complicate it and exacerbate it. But all these dynamics would be there anyway, whether it's Biden, Obama, Trump, Bush, or anybody.
This is the problem with the imperialists and they talking heads and they propaganda. So they're saying, how long are we going to let Iran push us around? That's what they're saying. How long are we going to let Iran push us around? The Iranians and the revolutionaries are like, how long are we going to let the imperialists occupy our countries and steal our wealth and kill our leaders and assassinate us in our countries? You see, we're missing something here. The U.S. feel like they're being bullied because people want them out of their damn country. Iraq wants you out their damn country. They feel like, no, we have to protect our interests. You see, this is the problem. If you ask the U.S., what are you doing in Iraq protecting our interests? The Iraqis don't want you there. They're all ain't your fucking interest. So they say, oh, no, we're fighting ISIS. Where ISIS at? They're in Iraq. Where they at? No, but if we leave, they'll be here again. See these threats. that the U.S. keep. See, they're holding ISIS over the Iraqis' heads.
Anybody else in the White House so far?
All good points. Michael, thank you very much. Now we wait to see what the Iranian calculus is. It's good to see you. Thank
Israel and its allies are preparing for a strike by Iran after the death of a senior Hamas official last week in Tehran. We talked a little bit about this off the top. President Biden met with his national security team at the White House Situation Room on Monday. The Pentagon has also sent additional aircraft and warships to the Middle East to help defend Israel. Earlier, Secretary of State Antony Blinken called it a critical moment.
We are engaged in intense diplomacy, pretty much round the clock, with a very simple message. All parties must refrain from escalation.
CBS News foreign correspondent Deborah Patta is in East Jerusalem as concerns of a wider conflict in the Middle East run high. Deborah?
The war drums are certainly getting louder in this region. Following Ismail Haniyeh's assassination, Tehran says Israel must be punished for what it calls its cowardly attack on Iranian soil. Both Israel and Iran say they don't want this to escalate, but nobody wants to be the first to take a step back. Former Israeli diplomat to the U.S., Alon Pincus, says the most worrying scenario is a 360-degree attack involving Hezbollah.
That's not true. That's not true. They both do not. Iran said they don't give a damn about it escalate. They don't give a shit about an all-out war. That's what Iran said. No, so they both not saying they don't want it to go no further. Iran is saying the hell with these people. If they want World War III, that's where we are.
In Lebanon, Iran from the east, and the Houthis in Yemen. He's concerned that in the Israeli government, there are no cool heads prevailing at the moment, saying the last thing America wants is a scenario in which they are dragged into a conflict, particularly during an election year. But support for Israel remains ironclad. U.S. General Michael Kurilla, who helped coordinate the defense of Israel during the Iranian attack in April, when more than 300 missiles and drones were fired, was back here today meeting with Israel's defense minister. The U.S. still believes the best way to prevent this from spiraling out of control is a ceasefire in Gaza. And there are high levels of anxiety here, but for many Israelis, life simply goes on. There's still an all-out effort internationally to prevent this from escalating. But one mistake, Jeff, could be lethal.
Deborah Patta, thank you. CBS News senior White House and political correspondent Ed O'Keefe joins me now. Ed, how is the White House preparing for what's next between Iran and Israel?
Jeff, good to be with you. The president, the vice president, and their top national security advisors wrapped up a meeting of several hours at the White House this afternoon going over the potential threats to what's going on in the Middle East. We know, for example, that there's grave concern about the situation at the Iraqi air base that you were reporting on earlier today, and that word of that seemed to come as this meeting was breaking up. We also know the Secretary of State has been on the phone with various officials through the weekend, including the Prime Minister of Iraq. The Deputy White House National Security Advisor told us yesterday on Face the Nation, for example, that they've been in touch with leaders of Jordan, reaching out through intermediaries to folks in Iran as well to try to stave off some kind of an escalation in Lebanon or along the northern front of Israel, which of course would be probably the biggest concern at this point, because that would essentially open up this war to even more players and to Iranian proxies.
As far as the ceasefire deal, I mean, this sort of gets lost in all this as tensions escalate, but I know the White House is still hoping for a ceasefire. Where does that stand, Ed?
Yeah, I mean, we know, for example, that the president had a pretty spirited conversation with President Biden, or with the Israeli Prime Minister last week, to go over the particulars, and was reportedly pushing him to try to get a deal in the next week to 2 weeks in order to, turn down the temperature and get those people freed and hopefully avoid a wider conflict. But then,
now what they tell you, Joe Biden talked to Benjamin Netanyahu. We need a deal. We got to get a deal. And Benjamin Netanyahu started assassinating the leaders of Hezbollah and Hamas, assassinated the leader of Hamas in Iran, giving Joe Biden the middle finger, saying, the hell with you. You gonna go to World War III with me and ain't gonna be no peace deal. So the U.S. can come on TV every day and talk about peace agreement like they've been saying we're near a peace agreement for 6 months. No, you're not. You're lying. And Benjamin Netanyahu is making sure you don't get no damn deal. You're gonna have to send those troops and fight.
That conversation came just days after the leaders of Hezbollah and Hamas, those senior leaders, were killed in Beirut and Tehran. And that's what's causing now the concern about the potential escalation of this. We have U.S. naval vessels being moved into the region with more air power on the potential threat of Iranian attacks or attacks from their proxies. So all of it, in essence, is interconnected. What you're seeing tonight in Iraq is probably being caused by proxies of Iran. At least that would be one theory, because that's who's done it before. Is that part of the retaliation? There's concern about the northern front between Israel and Lebanon. There's concern about what the Houthis could do. All of it could cause this to just blow up in the coming days. And it's why the White House, at least today, was so focused on trying to avoid that from happening. And while we'll likely hear that the president, the Secretary of State, and others are continuing to work the phones to not only get that ceasefire and hostage deal, but also keep these parties from causing a wider war.
That's a lot. You should be on their phone negotiating your troops leaving Iraq, because Iraqis say they don't want you in their country. But let's just back up real quick. What happened in Iraq 4 days ago? See, the U.S., they be murdering all over the world and don't want to report on it.
Grouping of Iraqi, well, as regional tensions increase after Israel's strike in Beirut, the U.S. has now carried out a strike in Iraq. U.S. officials say the strike was carried out in self-defense due to a threat to U.S.-led coalition forces.
See, here we go.
The U.S.
How can you be committing self-defense in Iraq? That don't make sense. Wouldn't the Iraqis be the ones self-defending themselves in their country? How can the imperialists, how can the invaders? It don't make sense. How can you be committing self-defense and the UN and already ruled on? That's a lie. All people who occupy got the right to fight back. That's why the Palestinians got the right to fight back. They occupy. Any occupied nation got the right to fight back. Iraq, occupied. They want the U.S. gone. The U.S. is saying, we're killing you out of self-defense. Come on now.
Claimed the strike targeted militants that were looking to launch drones. Officials said that the action underscores Washington's commitment to the safety and security of its personnel. They added that the airstrike was carried out in Musayab, which is located in Babel province, but did not provide more details on the location. The attack hit a base south of Baghdad used by Iraq's mobilization forces. As per Iraqi police, the strike killed 4 members of the group and 4 others were wounded. The 150,000-strong PMF contains several Iran-aligned armed militias.
Now,
it is
150,000 strong armed force. That's just one of them. That's not the Iraq military. You see, 150,000 strong. They want to fight the U.S. That's what they want to do. You see? But they are part of the Iraq military. You are killing Iraq military and saying they are Iranian influenced. Who cares? They can get help from Iran to kick you out their country. See this crazy shit. If you try to kick the U.S. out your country, then they label you a terrorist. But Hamas is the terrorist? No, the U.S.
is a state-sanctioned grouping of Iraqi paramilitaries and is dominated by groups loyal to Iran and with close ties to its Revolutionary Guards. Iraq has witnessed a tit-for-tat attack since the Israel-Hamas war erupted in October last year, but this was the first strike.
Revolutionary salute. Revolutionary salute to our queen, y'all's kids, for the $20 donation to the war chest. Revolutionary way of life. I absolutely appreciate the donation and the love, queen. Salute.
By American forces in Iraq since February. It comes at a time when there have been 2 recent attacks targeting U.S. and allied forces in Iraq. Last week, Several rockets were launched towards an al-Assad base, and on July 16th, 2 balls were launched towards the same facility. The base host troops form the US-led coalition. Remember, the US military has around 2,500 troops in Iraq and 900 in Syria. The coalition was deployed to Iraq at the government's request in 2014 in a bid to help combat the Islamic State group.
That's not true. Remember, the Iraqi government finally kicked the U.S. out with the help of Iran. As soon as they kicked them out, next thing you know, ISIS popped up. Obama and the U.S. military and the Western allies created ISIS. So ISIS was able to take over large parts of Iraq. So the U.S. forced Iraq, say, hey, ISIS is going to take over your oil fields unless you let us back in. That's how they got back in. And they started helping Iraq kill some of the terrorists that they sicked on. That's the sick game they play. That's why the terrorists is out of their mind. The U.S. push you to do shit, then they kill you. That's crazy.
Gentlemen, welcome to today's transfer of authority ceremony.
But this is just like Niger, Burkina Faso, Mali. So think of the same thing, how they had to kick the U.S. and the French out the bases because they was what? They was pretending like they were fighting terrorists. It's the same playbook, but they're not. They wasn't fighting terrorists in Africa. It's the same playbook in the Middle East. These people want the U.S. gone because you're not fighting any terrorists. To them, you are the terrorists. No terrorists are killing them. You're killing them.
Mission Task Force, consisting of forces from the U.S. Army, Marine Corps, Navy, and Air Force, as well as units from Denmark.
Denmark, all of the greatest white nations in the world. They always come together to do the same shit. That's disgusting, bro. But yeah, they gonna wish they wasn't now though, because they got a real fight. They think the Taliban handling rough. They really in it now though. But okay, we gonna because we definitely need to see. All right, yeah. Before we look at what Iran might be willing to do, we're gonna take a step back. The reason we're at this point with Iraq and the U.S. They have signed agreements. The U.S. done agreed to get the hell out that country, but they dragging their feet. You see, trying to create some more terrorists.
That I am gonna. It says, sir, point of correction. It was a Russian Iskander mobile that he was used to kill this. There are some hidden agenda behind the scenes that I am gonna share with you in this analysis that I'm going to provide you. So, but let us ask the key question, like we always do, because those questions help you to at least put things in perspective. Here are the questions here, guys. First question: why did the U.S. overextend in its stay? We're not staying there because we're staying for some other objectives. Second thing: why does Iraq want the U.S. coalition forces out now? Why they didn't push for it 2 years before? Because remember, this goes back all the way to 2011. I remember my last trip to Iraq was in 2010, if I'm not mistaken. Third question, which is the key. This is why I decided to divide this into 3 key elements: 1 geopolitical, 1 financial, and 1 economics, to provide you the big picture. And of course, you reach your own conclusion. Third question is something brewing geopolitically in the region? And most likely you know the answer. Just go back to what I talked about yesterday. So, yeah. And the last question, you should not ignore: what do Iran, Russia, China have to do with all this? There is some links there. So this is what we're going to be addressing in general term. I provide you some pictures, some maps, and I'm going to do a little bit of history of Iraq because you need to understand this one yourself. So let's talk about just the background first, then I'll get into the geography and so forth. So, well, now the question that is, and I came across an article, by the way, from Shafaq News. Shafaq News is overseas, not here in the US. And that's what I give credit to in this picture here. This is an Arabic term for Shafaq news. That's written in Arabic language there. So Iraq now, the Iraqi government basically wants the U.S.-led coalition. When I say U.S.-led, remember, there are more than just the U.S. present there. And I'm going to share with you the countries and the one
now,
that...
Never forget, what we've seen in Africa, it's always the same conquering imperialist countries. They're always everywhere together, talking about they're fighting terrorists. And when you look at this, they're not fighting terrorists. The same way they conquered us and shackled us, chained us, it's the same group of bastards doing the same bullshit.
Been lying about saying, oh, we are not in Iraq. We have never been in Iraq. They were lying, including our neighbor to the north, Canada, which, by the way, guys, Canada is collapsing economically. You don't hear much about. It is collapsing economically. It's going the same direction as the UK.
Oh, the US had an economic collapse, 2-point-something trillion wiped off the books. We're going to touch on that tomorrow. We ain't going to get in that today, but yeah, the West is collapsing, but they won't drag the whole world down with them.
And I will even extend it to Australia. What they all share in common. They all follow the monarchy in England. But that's beside the point. So Iraq.
Revolutionary salute to our brothers de jour brewer for the $5 donation to the war chest. Revolution is a way of life. I absolutely appreciate the love, family. Salute to you.
Aims sort of now asking for the U.S.-led coalition to withdraw its forces by September. Why wait till September? Of course, you need the time frame. You can't just back overnight. That just doesn't make sense and doesn't happen that way. You got equipment, you got, unless we do it in one condition or one way. And you know what that way is? It's the same way we did in which country we just packed and left. I want you guys to type in the name of that country. You should know this one here. It was a very embarrassing, and we left everything behind. So let me just see which country. And oh, you got it. Jamie Dodger, you got it. You got it. And Mohammed Mazhar, you got it. You guys got it. That's the country. We just packed and left almost $1 billion worth of weapons. I was in Bagram Air Base. It's not a small place with all the massive equipment. We just left the stuff behind. Almost $1 billion. It was $800+ million dollars worth of equipment. Almost $1 billion. It's the same thing here in Iraq, because if we wanted to leave, we just leave. On the other hand, what are we doing since 2011? And this is where you have to understand. Now the U.S. is saying, well, sure, we can enter into some agreements and we will leave by 2025. No, but now it's up to the Iraqi government to push.
See, they got to they need help from Iran. You see, how did Niger get the U.S. and France up out their country quickly? It didn't take years. It took months. Get up out of here with the help of Russia, with the help of Iran. Now the U.S. is trying to keep that from happening. See, they didn't get to strike them African bases because the Russians hurry up and got in there and protected them. That's what they're doing in Iraq. They steady hitting these bases and calling them Iranian-backed terrorists. That's BS. This is the same scenario. This is what Japan and Germany are supposed to be doing. You got to get these imperialists up out your country.
It's a sovereign state. Of course, we were the one to install the previous prime minister, Nouri al-Maliki, and I was there. Never liked the guy because he was a wishy-washy. Ayad Allawi was also wishy-washy. With all of them corrupted and having their own assets in England. Shame. Iraq is a rich country in oil, and yet they live in poverty. And I couldn't understand that. But at the same time, what makes Iraq different than Niger, for example, as far as political decisions? When Niger made the decision, said to the US, you need to pack and leave. You have a week to pack your stuff and get out. Simple as that. But there are some other aspects to all this that is very, very intricate. And this is the reason why I wanted to stress or provide you the analysis about. But first, let us get into I want to show you the map. I'm not going to get into the whole geography of it, but you need to see certain let me remove this one here. Okay, let me share the screen with you. And by the way, guys, I need you to keep an eye open on the chat box. If you notice any bot, just give me a heads up here, so I will remove that. I watched the video yesterday, and I pinned one exactly, and I removed it from the whole channel altogether. And I reported it, by the way. So because those entities have no place here on our channel. So, all right, let me share the screen with you here just for you to see the map. Then I'm going to detail the history aspects of it, because it's very, very important for you to understand these dynamics. And it will make more sense to you once you put it together, as far as, oh, this is why the US wanted to stay. Okay, it's taking time here for it to expand the full screen. Let me see here.
Raided the terrorists to force their way into the country.
Junk stuff here.
So then they can.
So this is Baghdad, the capital. So the idea of thinking about the importance of why we have to have an understanding of the history of the country. So, and I have a specific link that I'm going to share with you later. For now, I'm just going to provide some snippets of what that history is all about. So, of course, when we think about the history of Iraq, a lot of people will not know much. That anything is start in the 20th century. That's usually where the sort of the reference for the contemporary time. However, the earliest time of Iraq goes back some 4 millennia. Yeah, that's how far it goes back. So from about 4,500 BC, there were settlements on the edges of the marshes where the Tigris River and the Euphrates River reached the Persian Gulf. That's how far back it goes. So back then, the Greek named Mesopotamia. That's where the name is coming from. And I think I have another picture here. Let me just close this one and open, if I can find it. Maybe, maybe not. No, I don't. And life goes on. So anyway, then the Mesopotamians, which means between the rivers. That's what the name means. So civilization at that time, the existence of town and cities and so forth, was established a little earlier than 3,100 BC. This is why a lot of people do not know the center of civilization, especially for the Arab world, the Arab world. Yeah, one thing that I learned throughout the history is that the grammar, the Arabic grammar, was established in Iraq, not in Egypt, in Iraq. So from that time, meaning 3,100 BC, until the end of the Ottoman Empire, the development of Iraq is part of the history of Mesopotamia. That's how. So anytime you hear Mesopotamia, you have to think in terms of Iraq. So for almost 4 centuries, 4 centuries from the arrival of the Sultan was like the equivalency of king in the Ottoman Empire, and his army, which they arrived into Iraq in 1534, according to historical record. So when I say Iraq, the whole region is that matter, was under the rule of the Ottoman dynasty in Istanbul. That's how it was. So what happened at that time? The head of the Ottoman Empire wanted to have provinces, and one of the the governorate was based in Baghdad, which is the capital of today's Iraq. So on 2 brief occasions, the neighboring Safavids dynasty, which I talked about in my Iran book, which was in Iran, intrudes, because that's, remember, the Persian Empire at that time, during that time. And for much of the 18th century, the region was under the control of the Mamluks, officially subordinate to the Sultan, but in effect, independent. So then you move into World War I, and that is very important. Why is this? Because when Turkey sided with, which country did Turkey sided with during World War I? I want to test your knowledge on this, guys. Can you please type in the country? Just the country. Which country did Turkey sided with during World War I? Oh, Muslim revert, you got it. It was Germany. Yeah, whoever thought, right? And that changes the region out of recognition, ending the Ottoman century. That's what. So I think it was a mistake by them, but for them, who cares? But then what comes after this? The British Mandate from 1920 all the way to 1958. And I'm not going to go through the details of it. I'll provide you the link, but I'll share a few things with you here. So when the Germans back in 1918 sought armistice at the time in early November of that year. And why? To end the war, of course. So delegates to the peace conference gathered in none other than Paris for 2 months later. Paris 2 months later after that. So, and their task was, for one specific reason, is working out the precise terms that will impose if treaty is to be signed. Why am I highlighting this? It's the same conditions we see in today. And you compare this one to the Ukraine conflict. And that's like what I'm saying. So the US hold the cards on side of Ukraine, which means will not allow Ukraine to move an inch. Even if Ukraine now is decimated, no, actually it was a poll inside Ukraine that they wanted to surrender. But we're not going to let it because of the terms. Same in history here. So, and this treaty, before it was signed with the defeated nations at that time. So the treaty with the Ottoman Empire is the last to be agreed upon. But however, it was not signed till 1920. There is a place in France called Sèvres. It's a city there. So. Now, the terms of the treaty, by the way, were very harsh. So the empire, and listen carefully, this is where the Western power thinks in terms of divided and conquer, which is what we're seeing here now. I see it happening right now in Europe, but of course it's going to be happening even more in Asia. Divide and conquer. So the empire at that time is to be entirely dismantled, with all Middle Eastern provinces previously under Turkish control now made the responsibility of, you guys got it, which two countries became the responsibility of? That played a major role after World War I. Can you guys guess which those two countries are? To those who are familiar with history here. I'm just trying to see. So which two countries that were given the responsibility after the Turkish Empire was dismantled? And those are shaped the history of the Middle East or West Asia. France and England. You're absolutely correct. Let me see who answered this one here. France, Bro Eswar, you got it right. France, UK, Hafir, you got it right. France and Britain, John Smith, you guys got it. You got Hamed City, you got it also. France and England. Why? Because they get the mandate, which means now we decide. Well, who the heck gave you the right? Yeah, you defeated the Ottoman Empire, but now you're going to carve out all the proceeds or the spoils of the war without even understanding the historical, cultural, religious, and ethnic divisions that exist within the region. That was the problem what we're seeing today in West Asia. So, and the division between those two European nations has already been agreed upon prior. And this is why it was foreseen as to the idea that Turkey is going to be defeated. It just matters now of how we're going to proceed. This is exactly what we are. Once again, I'm going to bring you back to today, contemporary time. The same scenario we're seeing in Ukraine. It was preconceived notion on our part, well, Ukraine is going to be defeated anyway. So, but what it becomes is for our entities. Europeans won't get much. We do. Because we're using the Europeans. You got the likes of JP Morgans. You got the likes of Blackrock now given the mandate to reconstruct Ukraine. It's all tactics. And this is part of what the geopolitical dynamics are all about. So, and this, of course, leads us to 1916 with the Sykes-Picot Agreement. I'm not going to get into it. That was the foreign ministers for France and the UK at the time. And they made the agreement secretly and signed it. So, And that is where, you fast forward to between 1930 and 1958. Also, what happened? It was the emergence of the Kingdom of Iraq. Yes, he was a kingdom there. So in 1930, British signed an Anglo-Iraqi treaty with none other than Faisal. Faisal was the king of Iraq back then. It gives his kingdom full independence, but with major military concessions to Britain. Britain, the government here, I'm not talking about people, the government have not done well for the history of the world. They really, really, really destroyed humanity. And the same way we are doing it right now. We've been doing it for a while. It saddens me to say this about my country, but I will not shy away from saying it. When my country does wrong, I am going to express it. I don't give a damn what others think. Yeah, you hear that terms of where you don't like America. It's nonsense. It's the destruction of a human race. Why are we doing this for? Greed. It's exactly what Britain did. So these are important to Britain for two reasons. Why Britain decided to do this with King Faisal at the time. One, can you guess the first one? Is oil. You got it. Iraq is rich in oil. And second one has to do with importance of defense of India. Because UK, when it got involved in around the world, it has to find the resources. So you control other countries to use the proceeds from that country to support your naval assets. Same thing we've been seeing. This is why I'm saying, to go back to the beginning of this conversation here, the Iraqi government shouldn't be waiting until September or 2025. All they need to do, put it on paper and tell the Americans, you know what? We need you to pack your stuff and get out. Simple as that. Niger did it. And Niger is not the same capacity as Iraq. So what's preventing Iraq from doing this unless the heads of the governments are in the pockets of the US? And I am aware of some, because I was aware of the asset that some of them were having in England. So now, fast forward to 1930 when Faisal died, and he's succeeded by his only son, Ghazi. That was his name, who himself dies 6 years later. And his son, by now only 3, became a king as Faisal's second, because he was just a kid, but they had to give him the throne because it goes heredity, which I don't believe in that nonsense stuff anyway, because I don't believe in kingdom anyway. So Faisal's second reign is brought in violence in 1958. And this where the anti-monarch coup took place. But also what happened during this time in the 50s? And again, I'm going to ask you here, what happened in the Arab world? Not just in that part of the world. It was something going on, major movement. I'm giving you a heads up here. What was it? What was it? You should know this because it took place in many countries in the West Asia. There was one now, starts with an N. The Suez Canal. No, this is a movement that took. I'll give you a hint, guys. Arab nationalism, David King. You got it. Arab nationalism started with, of course, Jamal Abdel Nasser. And this is where Saddam Hussein came in. This is where the Ba'ath Party of Assad in Syria came in. That is what, brotherhood shows up later on, and I will touch on this one as I move forward here. So, and this is why you have to understand this. And I'm going to take you fast to 2003. You all know what happened in 2003. So, the invasion. And of course, and I wrote in my book, as a matter of fact, I'm going to share it with you now before I'll get into the analysis of the topic. But let me share a picture with you as to which book I wrote this in. This one I wrote it in my first book, which, by the way, I do have. If you guys wanna buy this book here, just go to a Buy Me Coffee platform and enter extra, and you'll find it there. So even back then, I argued that because when we think 2003, what comes to mind right away? Bush's foreign policy. because it is perplexing, because in that its possession, as I argued back then, towards the greater Middle East. At that time, I used the term Middle East because that's the term familiar here in the Western world. I know, guys, it's West Asia. I am aware of that. I use the term interchangeably. Western audience will never understand. Not all, of course, I shall not generalize. They will never understand when you mention West Asia. But West Asia is the Middle East. So, and here's the thing. American foreign policy during that time under Bush was perplexing, was inconsistent in its dealing with countries in the region. You know, the political double standard undermined U.S. credibility back then, which still, by the way, till today, and has led the populace in the Muslim world to lose faith in American principles. We never were honest about it. Let's say it straightforward. So the military coup in Egypt that saw the removal of the democratically elected president, Mohamed Morsi, is a case in point. We say we stand for democracy. When they had elections, they elected someone else that Washington didn't want. All of a sudden, we turn on them by allowing the coup. And by the way, guys, did you know who also gave the green light to the coup? Can you guess which country? Besides the US. It's not classified. Even though I was in a government at that time, but it wasn't classified. So what I'm sharing with you, it's not classified. And I need to know your input, which country you think gave the green light also. And this country will have a reason to allow this. And this one for religious purposes. No, not Israel, no. Ahmed Sidi, you got it. It was Saudi Arabia. Saudi Arabia got the funding and got the green light with the United States for this one. And this is exactly what I argued back then in my book when I discussed this part of the history of Egypt. So another example of the U.S. foreign policy double standard was evident when Bush promoted democracy in Iraq and Afghanistan, but continued to support other repressive and undemocratic regimes in West Asia and North Africa. So, now, of course, you all know the story that God has told him to spread democracy in the region, which is nonsense anyway. So, and here is the key to all this, because I had to highlight it. Historians also note that under President Bush, the United States became sort of the victim of its own success and aspiration. Stated differently, Mr. Bush wanted to assert America's power by pushing for democracy. And when his call was put to test, he disliked the outcome. And I'm going to give you a specific example: the election of Hamas and the rise through the ballot of the group in Lebanon, Hezbollah that is, and the Muslim Brothers in Egypt challenged his efforts. So that is the key that I want you to understand in this aspect as I talked about history. So let me finish this history here and I move on to talking about, well, actually part of this history is what we're talking about today. And it has to do with the process of, or the presence rather, of the US forces and coalition. Now, you'll remember 2003, that's when Paul Bremer, he was the US administrator of Iraq. What was his first act? And I was shaking my head when he did that. You know what was his first act? Is to dismantle the Iraqi military, which was a mistake. Fast forward to 2011. Between 2009 and 2011, many in Iraq viewed the presence of Western troops on their soil as a foreign occupation. Do you think the same thing happening now in Japan, South Korea, Philippines, Australia, Germany, Italy, soon Finland? What do you guys think? So, and this is why in 2008, a bilateral agreement between Iraq and the U.S. was made about none other than Nouri Maliki, the former prime minister, that will allow the U.S. presence there, but they will need to withdraw from the cities in 2009 and from the country by the end of 2011. All this changed A few years later, you all know why, because all of a sudden terrorism appears in Iraq. So, and we all know who introduced that. So I'm not going to get into all this right now. I will provide you guys the link. It is worth reading if you get a chance to do so. So let me get into my own analysis and conversations here. So what happened? 3 sources inside the U.S. now saying that the U.S. ambassador to Iraq, and I have a picture of her, and I'm very familiar with her, whose dad is Polish, from Poland. He was a nuclear physicist. He used to teach nuclear physics. And her mom is from Canada. So anyway, Elena Romanovsky, she's the one that gives the message to the Iraqi prime minister, Sudani, as far as the arrangements that the U.S., and listen carefully to what she said. So funny. But again, it's the manipulation. Here is what the letter says. It says that the U.S. has dropped precondition that attacks by Iran-backed Iraqi militant groups must first stop. So it was a condition for the U.S. to leave. Now the U.S. is dropping this. All this doesn't make any sense. If you are a sovereign state, well, you are attacked because you are not welcome. It's common sense. So you either have to pack and leave, or you're going to experience the same fate like what the 50 foreigner instructors in Kharkov have just experienced recently with the bombing from Russia. Simple as that. So, but it tells you right there how the wording of certain aspects will make more way for manipulation as far as really what's going on. Well, of course, we know the U.S. has about 2,500 troops, sort of advising the local government. No. And this is to deal with terrorism and so forth. No, that's nonsense. That's nonsense. Because here is what happened, or is what's happened and what is happening. U.S. troops, be they in Iraq or Syria, have been attacked more than 150 times. Of course, we don't hear much about this one. 150 times. What does it tell you? This, to me, it's clear and loud message that we want you out. And this, of course, has led to retaliatory strikes by the U.S. Well, you deploying your forces in a foreign soil, we got a problem with that. I mean, for the like of Germany or Japan or South Korea or Australia or Philippines, those are voiceless. Those are useless anyway. When you have 30,000 plus troops, for example, in Japan, South Korea, Germany, that's
Revolutionary salute to our King, Queen Yaya's kids for the 10 Core-Figure gifted memberships to the Core-Figure family. Revolution is way of life. Absolutely appreciate the love, Queen. Salute.
Problematic. So, and this is why now, because the retaliation and also the retaliation from the militias inside Iraq is leading the prime minister, Sudani, to sort of call for a swift exit of the U.S. and its coalition, all of them out of Iraq. But still didn't make any sense for them to make the arrangements till 2025. I just personally have a hard time digesting this information coming out of Washington, not Iraq. Because remember, it was just a meeting a week and a half ago in Washington between Iraq and the U.S. regarding this particular issue. And this is why it says the article, by the way, from the Shafaq stated, and I quote, the U.S. and Iraq are close to agreement on starting the Higher Military Commission dialogue that was announced back in August. This commission will allow for a joint evaluation of Iraqi security forces' capacity to fight terrorism and so forth. No, you need to be out. You need to get out. Simple as that. And here is where the shocking part for me, when I digged into the record, only to find out that the countries that have been involved inside the coalition. So, and I'm going to state them quickly for you guys. I'm not going to go into more details here. And this started from 2003. Just pay attention to the countries, you reach your own conclusion. Afghanistan, Albania, Australia, Azerbaijan, Bulgaria, Colombia, Czech Republic, Denmark, Salvador, Eritrea, Estonia, Ethiopia, Georgia, Hungary, Iceland, Italy, Japan, South Korea, Latvia, Lithuania, Macedonia, the Netherlands, Nicaragua, the Philippines, Poland, Romania, Slovakia, Spain, Turkey, the United Kingdom, and Uzbekistan. And of course, following this, Costa Rica, the Dominican Republic, Honduras, Kuwait, Marshall Islands, Micronesia, Mongolia, Palau, Portugal, Rwanda, Singapore, Solomon Island, and Uganda joined. Then in April 2003, Panama, Angola, and Tonga joined for that. Now, here is where the disturbing news that I found has to do with none other than Canada, our neighbor to the north, which, by the way, it's collapsing economically. I'm going to do a video for you down the road about the real conditions in Canada, which they don't get disclosed. You know, you all know the legislation or the law that the dictator Trudeau's government has passed as far as having control over him. Everything has to be sort of vetted by the government. That's why a lot of people do not know how bad it is getting in Canada. Very bad. So here is what happened back then. So Canada conducted clandestine deployments to Iraq. So according to the U.S. State Department, this one through a cable that was disclosed. Yeah, it wasn't supposed to, but it got disclosed. There were 15 countries, 15 participated covertly. And this according to the leaked U.S. diplomatic cables. So including that the Canadian government positioned that they would not participate in the invasion. That's what they said. However, Canadian officials allegedly promised to clandestinely support it. In addition to naval vessels and personnel already in the region, Canadian officers, Major General Walter Latansky and Peter Delvin and Nicholas Manner, served as deputy commanding generals of a multinational corps in Iraq. And Canadian pilots flew their Boeing C-17, which is a military transport, into Iraq to season the flight crew. In 2003, Prime Minister at that time, Jean Chrétien, admitted that some Canadian troops could be serving alongside US and British troops in Iraq. It's possible, he said. Liar, you know, but they are not in combat role, which it's a lie. Canadian Defense Minister John McCallum at that time refused to give Parliament detail. So you reach your own conclusion. The same argument was made about their presence in Afghanistan. I was there. As a matter of fact, I'm going to share a personal story with you if you allow me. I was one day in Iraq, in Afghanistan. I went to the PX, need to get something. I was dressed in civilian. I hardly ever would put in a military back then. So went in. Some of my colleagues went inside. I didn't want to go in, so I stood out, just standing up. And on my right side, there were two Canadians, because I could tell by their insignia, their uniform, and they're Canadian. And one of them told the other, of course, in English, he said, "Hey, check out this guy on your left," which was about me. He looks like an Iranian. So, and I just laughed. I was able to hear because I was so close. So, and the assumption on their part that I was an American, so because my dark hair, my dark blue eyes, and all that. So I'm not blonde and blue eyes and all that. So I looked at him and I just smiled and I said, "Well, you need to be careful what you say, man. You know, I happen to be your neighbor in the South, someone who's watching you back." And he was like, "Oops." And I said, "Yeah, oops." That just shows you the ignorance. Just because somebody looks different, we assume. And I didn't take it personally as like, you know, you guys need to learn a lot about what's going on. So anyway, this is what I wanted to highlight to you about Canada. Now, let me get into my own analysis. As I said, I'm going to divide it into three: geopolitical, financial, and economic. From the geopolitical aspects, and I'm going to keep this very, very brief to you, in the aspect that, like I mentioned yesterday, with now what Russia is going to do. This is why I mentioned earlier, is something brewing in that region geopolitically? And the answer is yes, because what Russia planning to do, what Russia decide to do with Iran as far as the military cooperation, and in addition to what China is doing in Iraq, and that's from an economic perspective, which I will tackle shortly here. But the idea that the dynamics changing in the region, especially when you get the three groups, the one in Lebanon, the one in Yemen, and the ones in Iraq, all of them attacking, especially Israel in that part. But the Red Sea is controlled by the H group. So there is no worries there, except now that they're going to advance with the weaponry. So Iraq wanted to make sure, because if the U.S. forces are there, they're going to become a target. If they become a target, sometimes when you launch something, you might not be able to control where it lands. And Iraq wanted to make sure that it will not be perceived geopolitically as hosting U.S. forces, because now if you host U.S. forces, it's a liability, politically speaking. This is why Niger made the decision it made. But this is also why Japan couldn't, why North Korea couldn't, Philippines, Australia, Germany, Italy, and now Finland. You know, they couldn't. They're too weak, politically speaking. But the fact that Iraq was thinking in terms of the optics of it, let alone where Iran is regarding its nuclear program. That's another dimension to all this. Because even back then, I argued, if we are to consider, for example, if hypothetically, back then when I argued that I don't see Israel attacking Iran, it can't. Because it will be showered with missiles from all directions. And now it's become clear. This is why the H group in Yemen mentioned we have a bank of targets. In other words, we have a list of targets inside Israel. And back then I argued that any military act against Iran will put the US in a political limbo and drag it into yet another conflict in the region. The last agreement, or the late agreement at that time, was between P5, the 5 permanent members of the UN Security Council, and Germany. They made agreement with Iran regarding the nuclear deal. And back then I argued that the late agreement between the West and Iran may compel Israel to shelve any attack plan until further notice. However, here is what I wrote back then, and it applies today. I wrote, should conditions vis-a-vis this agreement changes, which it did, Israel may reconsider an attack on Iran's nuclear facilities with the possibility of US support. One should recall how the war between Iran and Iraq in the 1980s unified the Iranians. A similar galvanization of Iran will happen if Israel attacks. An attack on Iran will lead to an overwhelming response and unification of all stripes in that society, meaning Iran, against the United States and Israel. That is exactly where I argued this one here. And let me just put a copy link. This is a link for, I'm going to put the link for those who might want to be interested in reading about the book. I have it on Buy Me Coffee if you want to. Here, I put it in chat box for you guys if you want ever to do that. So now the geopolitical dynamics, this is what I'm saying. You have to think in terms of why Iraq now is pushing for it, why they shouldn't wait till 2025. The dynamics will be different by then. If they don't take care of it now, you don't wait till September. You tell them, you tell the Americans and all the coalition, you need to prepare now, start packing because we want you out. And here is the deadline. You put a deadline by the end of August. No ifs and buts, but you have to have a political will to do that. From a financial perspective, this is a major one. Why is this? And again, I am going to share with you, I did a video about this in 2023, in which I titled, and that video got about, I think so, over 130,000 views, whatever, because I titled it, Iraq Ditches the US Dollar. I don't know those, if you guys didn't see it, here is the link. I'm copying the link and put it in chat box for you. Just check it out later on. Because the issue here has to trace back its root to when that decision was made by the Iraqi government. The central bank in Iraq banned the US dollar transactions. And this was back in 2023, in May. That's when I did the video. Because here is the thing. At that time, Iraq is an OPEC member. You need to remember this. Okay? So what happened back then? The conversation started about some other oil, some other OPEC members will be selling oil not in a dollar currency. So that's why Iraq went ahead with that decision. And which these countries at that time? It was Saudi Arabia and United Arab Emirates. Why? They planned at that time to sell oil without the dollar. And this is why the whole idea of the new currency that is going on with the financial market enters into the play here. This is what my own analysis is leading me towards. Iraq wants to ensure it better get on it now before it's too late, as it's seeing other OPEC members moving into that direction by trading, selling oil in other currency beside the dollar. Where the issue Iraq has, you know where the issue is that its oil revenues are held in the Federal Reserve in New York in a special account. Makes you wonder, why are we holding money for a country here in the US? It's their oil, it's their money. And that's why Iraq is kind of watching what it says to the US, because the US could freeze that thing or take over. That's one. And of course, the US, Iraq is also seeing what is happening in Ukraine. That is why at that time, when the decision was made, they started to consider. Because back then, anyone who wants to sort of buy a house or a car, whatever, you will use the dollar, because the dinar, which is the currency of Iraq, was losing value. So when Iraqis will buy some big items, they use the dollar. They don't use the dinar for that one. So. But the financial aspect, you're going to have to look at it from the perspective of what is taking place right now. So this is why Iraq had to move into that direction. Like I mentioned, Saudi Arabia already said that the country is open to selling oil in different currencies, including the euro and the Chinese yuan. Iraqis are seeing where this is headed. Also, the Iraqis understand that the world is changing. The financial landscape on the global stage is changing. The financial global system is changing. It's going to take time, of course. The dollar is not going to die tomorrow. That's just common sense. But it is happening. And this is exactly why Iraq, the only thing that Iraq needs to think about is how far they want to drag this. Niger did it because Niger doesn't have any assets here. That's one major element that they needed to think about. And the last part or last element that I want to talk to you about is the economic aspects. And this is where China comes in. It was an article, and I'm going to share it with you later on. It was written by Muayyad Kinani. Those are our Iraqi names. Adam Makari and Timur Azhari, those three authors. And this article was written in just 2 months ago, this year. So, and here is what it says, and I quote, Chinese companies won 5 bids to explore Iraqi oil and gas fields. Iraq oil minister said on Sunday, as Middle Eastern country hydrocarbon exploration licensing round continues into its second day. So Chinese companies have been
Revolutionary salute to our Queen Spiritual Rising for the $2.99 donation to the war chest. Revolution is a way of life. Absolutely appreciate the love, Queen. Salute.
The only, listen to this carefully, guys. Chinese companies have been the only foreign player to win the bid so far, taking licenses covering 10 oil and gas fields, while Iraqi Kurdish company KAR Group took 2. I was aware when I was in Iraq back in 2008 that a decision was made about Erbil, that Iraq central government decided to give the contract to China, not the US, and asked Exxon to leave. We didn't like it. We got pissed at the time, Nouri Maliki, when he was still, or I think the one after him. My point in all this, China is coming in for economic ventures, rebuilding Iraq. And I'm going to share some pictures with you. Here's a picture of the Chinese and Iraqi delegations signing 15 economic agreements, 15. That includes building 1,000 schools inside Iraq. This is the Al-Qademi, the previous prime minister. He's in the center, watching over the signature between China and Iraq regarding those agreements. So, because China is rebuilding Iraq. And when you think about, and I'm going to share in a map with you, because here's the thing, listen carefully to this. Actually, let me show you the map, because you need to see where those locations are for Iraq. There are some central provinces, and that's where China and Iraq agreed to rebuild. And here's the map of this. This is the provinces of Iraq. So what you're looking at, right in the center, among those contracts that the Chinese and the Iraqis signed, one of them was with a Chinese company called CNOOC, which won the bid to develop for oil exploration in Iraq, Block 7. Block 7 extends across the country's central and southern provinces, including Diwania, Babil, Najaf, Wasit, Muthanna. Those are the main ones. And that's what the oil minister said. If you look at the map, you see Babil right here below Baghdad. That's Babil. You see Diwania right here at the bottom. Samara, it's not there. They're not doing it. They're doing it just in those particular locations. In Diwania, Babil, Najaf, Wasit, and Muthanna. Those are the main locations where the Chinese is going to develop the oil field. Then you have the Chinese school that they are building. The Chinese project is that China and Iraq signed an agreement by which China will build 1,000 schools in Iraq, a long-stalled construction project as part of a move to help reconstruct the war-torn Middle Eastern country. Now, I looked into one site. Some of the schools have already been ahead of schedule, but when I tried to open the site, I couldn't. It says doesn't exist. Even though in the search engine, it shows right there, building school ahead of schedule. But when I clicked on it, it says doesn't exist. So, and I'm going to be looking at other ones. The only one I found is from the East. Some of the now you need to think about also why is China doing this. It's a strategy. This is what I'm saying. We play checkers. China, Russia, and others, mainly those two, they play chess. And chess, you have to be very strategic thinker when you do movements. That's exactly what China is doing, and rightly so, because when it comes out to geopolitics, it's all about national interests. Of course, you do it the right way, not causing havoc into countries like what we did in Iraq. So here is what happened. this building of schools, this exploration of oils that the Chinese signed, the 15 agreements, all this falls within particular aspects of the projects of BRI, the Belt and Road Initiative. It's because that's the future, economically speaking. Iraq wants to prosper economically, and rightly so. It's a rich country in oil, and yet they live in poverty. That doesn't add up.
Salute, Queen. I appreciate it.
And this is where, just to summarize all these guys, and I'll open it to some of your questions. This is where this all comes in as to why Iraq now needs to push hard in asking the U.S. to leave immediately, not till 2025 for the final withdrawal. No. A lot of stuff can happen between now and then. You ask them to leave now. Niger did it. I understand about the assets and all that stuff. But again, because our credibility is been shattered, we can't be trusted. And if we are to say we honor a sovereign state, well, here is a sovereign state that doesn't want the presence of U.S. forces there. So what are we doing there? And here is a picture here. This one I give the credit to Taher As-Sudani. That's his picture here. So this is where the difference is, guys. And I wanted to address this to you. This is not about just military withdrawal. You have to think in terms, when you think geopolitics, you think about the other moving parts, part of the equation. And for here, you look at about the financial, the geopolitical, and the economic aspects of it. So, and that's why I want you to get this picture here, the big picture that is, and of course, you reach your own conclusions. I'm going to provide you the links and everything else down in the description later on. And that's all I have to share with you guys. For now, I'm going to turn it over.
All right, so I wanted to fill y'all in on the Iraqis have already told the U.S. to leave. Leave. They signed the contracts. We want you out. We don't want you here. Sovereign country. You're not fighting no terrorists, just like Niger, Burkina Faso, Mali. People see you can kick them out. So let's get back to what happened today.
All right, welcome back in here to Live Now from Fox. I'm Andy Mack. Thank you so much for joining us. Let's turn our attention now to some breaking news on the international front. I do want to put up this tweet here on Live Now from Fox from Jennifer Griffin, Fox News reporter there covering the Pentagon. Breaking news as two defense officials tell Fox News several U.S. troops are injured following a rocket attack at Al-Assad Air Base in Iraq. The statement from the U.S. defense official saying in full, we can confirm that there was a suspected rocket attack.
Revolutionary salute to our brother Ricardo for the donation to the war chest. Revolution is a way of life. Absolutely appreciate the love, family. Salute to you.
Day against U.S. and coalition forces at Al-Assad Air Base in Iraq. Initial indications are that several U.S. personnel were injured. Base personnel are conducting a post-attack damage assessment. We will provide updates as more information becomes available. So just very preliminary right now of a rocket attack at Iraqi military base injures several U.S. personnel. Here on this Monday, the attack comes as tensions across the Middle East spiking following the killings last week of a senior Hezbollah commander in Lebanon and Hamas's top political leader in Iran and suspected Israeli attacks. Both groups are backed by Iran. Also from Aisha Hasni saying U.S. Navy ships are being strategically placed in the Middle East as Israel braces for retaliation. We've been covering it significantly for quite some time.
So we see that the Iraqis, not Iranian proxies, the Iraqis are attacking the U.S. They want them out their country. They don't want them there anymore. They want them to go, you see. So that's what it took place in Iraq. The beginning of the revolutionaries in Iraq saying, you got to get the hell up out of here, man. We don't want you here. This ain't got nothing to do with Iran. But since there's a big war going on in the Middle East, they might as well get the U.S. up out of there, which they will do. They will use this to get them up out of there.
Israel, but before we get there, since you and I spoke last, there was this prisoner exchange that involved several countries. The better known of the two Americans that were released, one of your fellow Marines, Paul Whelan, and a journalist for the Wall Street Journal named Evan Gershkovich. The Americans, of course, claiming that these people were just snatched off the street as bait and that they did nothing wrong. Let's start with Evan Gershkovich. What do the Russians say he did? What was their publicly stated basis for arresting and prosecuting him, and what was he convicted of?
He was convicted of espionage. Plain and short, he received classified information about the Russian defense industry, Russian military production that was of great interest to the United States intelligence community at the time. I mean, we have to keep that in mind. And he had conspired with an employee of a defense industry enterprise in the Russian city of Ekaterinburg, located basically east of the Ural Mountains, right on the threshold of where Europe and Asia meet. He traveled to Ekaterinburg after communicating his desire to receive very specific information from this individual. And he met with this individual in a restaurant where that individual provided him with an envelope that was filled with classified documents pertaining to sensitive Russian military industry secrets. And he was caught red-handed. The Russians
they never say on the news.
Held a trial in secret. They didn't present the evidence of in a public fashion, but they claim to have the evidence of the communications. They have the conversation that Evan had with this individual in the restaurant. They have photographed this, videotaped this, and it shows clearly this individual handing the envelope over to Evan. It's incontrovertible what he did. It's a crime in Russia, and he was found guilty of espionage. The question now is, was Evan simply a overzealous reporter who crossed the red line, but maybe believed he was committing journalism, or was he something more nefarious, an employee of the CIA? The CIA is on record talking to Congress about using journalists as a cover to gain access to areas where their diplomatic covered people can't. And that is the definition of Russia today. You can't send somebody who's operating under diplomatic cover in the United States Embassy, who has diplomatic immunity, to Ekaterinburg to carry out this kind of action. This is what you would send a non-official cover person to do. And the CIA has admitted it uses journalists as knocks. And the Russians believe, and I happen to agree with the Russians in this, that Evan Gershkovich was a knock working for the CIA.
Well, what is a knock, Scott?
Non-official cover. Basically, let's say right now in Moscow, the CIA has a station. They have a station chief. That station chief is there undercover along with all the other CIA officers that are there. Their cover is as a diplomat, so they might be there as the first, first counselor, first secretary, third secretary, agricultural advisor, economic advisor. Some operate under military cover. I'm not giving away secrets here. It's been published before. The CIA has acknowledged this in many of the records that they've released. But these people, if they get rolled up, if they get caught by the Russians, they operate under diplomatic cover. So they're protected. They get rolled up. The Russians take him in, photograph him, then they release him, and they're made persona non grata. They're kicked out of the country, never to return. A non-official cover is somebody who travels, who's an employee of the CIA, but not under a diplomatic passport. They travel as a businessman or as a journalist or something else, and they aren't protected. If they get rolled up, they have no protections. They're going to jail forever. And as CIA assets, they keep their mouths shut. There's a famous case where CIA knocks were rolled up in Cuba and spent a lot of years in jail. The United States didn't acknowledge them until after they released. And then there was a ceremony where they were appropriately, rewarded and commended. But I think Evan was a knock.
the level of secrecy, the level of materials that he had, if the same level of secrecy and type of materials had been in the hands of an American without a security clearance, would that in the US, would that person have been arrested?
Absolutely. You can't. Classified information is classified information. If I worked for Lockheed Martin and I grabbed an envelope of classified information about, aircraft production, et cetera, and I removed it from, a secure stored area and brought it home, and traveled around with an envelope here, there, and everywhere, and I was caught, I'd be arrested and thrown in jail. And if I tried to sell that to the Russians or give it to the Russians or Chinese or anybody else, I'd be arrested and accused of committing espionage. So, this is not a complicated question. Evan Gershowitz broke Russian law, and he knew he was breaking Russian law. I can guarantee you that the Wall Street Journal and all other major media outlets that operate in Moscow understand what Moscow rules are, and they know what they can and they can't do. And there's no way he thought he could get away with doing what he was doing as under the guise of legitimate journalism, nor did his employers. Wall Street Journal needs to answer some questions. Who tasked him with this job? Which one of his editors gave him this task? What were the rules of engagement, so to speak? Did he clear his meeting with his editors? Did they know that he was going to Ekaterinburg to meet with an employee of a defense industry site to receive an envelope of classified information? I'm going to bet that his employers weren't filled in on the details of what he was doing.
Briefly, what was your fellow Marine Paul Whelan arrested for? What was he doing in Russia?
Well, Paul Whelan's a different category. First of all, even though he was a Marine, once a Marine, always a Marine, he was discharged with a bad conduct discharge. He committed larceny using social security numbers of his fellow Marines to steal from. So he was kicked out with bad conduct discharge. So that's the opposite of an honorable discharge, which means he's unemployable from an intelligence standpoint. So the idea that Paul was working for the CIA or somebody else, government related, is absurd. They would never let him in with a bad conduct discharge. He was a freelancer doing whatever he was doing as a advisor, etc. He met with a Russian citizen who provided him with a USB stick that contained classified information about Russian FSB, the equivalent of the FBI. So again, it's the equivalent of a Russian coming here and meeting with somebody affiliated with the FBI who gave him a USB data stick that contained classified files about FBI operations and FBI personnel. If caught, you're arrested and you will go to jail for espionage. And Paul Whelan was caught with this. He claims that he was just doing research on his own, but you don't do research based on classified files received from somebody. Either he's the dumbest man alive, and again, his bad conduct discharge shows that he maybe doesn't possess the best judgment, or he just thought that he was capable of playing a game that he wasn't trained or qualified to play. But either way, he received classified information. The Russians have actually released some of the videotape showing him receiving the stick and showing him arrested by the FSB afterwards.
Wow. Switching gears over to Israel, is torture in Israel and reprehensible behavior by Israeli officials now so commonplace that it seeks to shock?
I believe so. I think we've gotten to the point where it's gone beyond perverted parody. When the Israelis jail 9 soldiers for raping Palestinian prisoners, and then Israeli citizens rise up and say that the Talmud interpretation of a Jewish law says it's not a crime to rape non-Jews and that these men should be freed. Not only that, then they sent hundreds of people to the Palestinian prisons demanding to be allowed in so they can rape the Palestinian prisoners because they're permitted to under Jewish law. This led to a near civil war in Israel where soldiers were facing off against soldiers. This isn't bad Hollywood movie. This isn't the preface to some sort of zombie apocalypse. This is reality happening in Israel right now. Our ally. We claim that Israel and America is alike in many ways. I don't know, when was the last time 500 American citizens stormed a state prison saying we need to be allowed in to rape the prisoners because we're permitted to under our religious beliefs. That's happening in Israel as we speak. The 9 soldiers were released now from custody. They're not going to be charged with a crime because apparently in Israel, raping prisoners is no longer a crime. That's just one thing. They're blowing up. They blew up a school today with students in it. The school burned. The students were inside the school burning to death. The parents were outside listening as their children screamed as they were burned to death. That happens on a daily basis. What Israel has become literally the worst incarnation of what we could imagine Nazi Germany was like back in the day. I mean, and some people even say that even the Nazis weren't this bad. I don't go quite that way. I think killing millions of people in horrific fashion is as bad as it gets. But I think Israel is approximating the scope and scale of that behavior.
Our friend and colleague, Alistair Crook, referred to the behavior which you have just summarized as Mein Kampf in reverse. This belief that non-Jews can be raped just because they're not Jewish.
I don't disagree with it. I have tremendous respect for Alistair Crook. He's somebody who, former British intelligence officer in the region, very extensive knowledge of Israel and Palestine, and so his insights and observations, carry a great deal of weight. And I need to also point out that the issue of Israel's far-right religious population, and the Talmudic scholars and students, it's been haunting Israel for some time. Yitzhak Rabin's assassin, the man who pulled the trigger on Yitzhak Rabin back in November of 1995, I believe, he claims that he was ordered to do this by a Talmudic Jewish rabbi who said that Yitzhak Rabin had violated Israeli law, was now an enemy of the Israeli people, and therefore had to be killed, that it was his religious duty to do this. This is the kind of perverted thinking that's widespread in Israel, that many of the battalions that operate in Gaza are reserve battalions drawn from Talmudic universities or camps, and these students believe that they have every right to murder, to rape, to pillage, to do whatever they want against non-Jews, and there's no crime, and they celebrate these crimes. So, Alistair Crook's onto something.
What do you think will happen next in light of the 2 assassinations that the Israeli government pulled off in Tehran and Beirut shortly after Prime Minister Netanyahu received adulation and obeisance from the audience he bought and paid for on the floor of the House of Representatives?
There's some question as to whether or not Netanyahu gave the United States a heads up that he was going to do this. And I think that the answer is he did give the United States heads up. I know the United States denies this, but something of this scope and scale couldn't have been carried out without the United States at least knowing that it was happening, so that we could, be prepared to respond. Israel attacked Iran. It's straight up. And Iran has said that is a red line, and that Iran's retaliation will be on a scope and scale greater than that which took place back in April when they carried out Operation True Promise. And this appears to be the direction that Iran is heading. Some people predict that this attack will take place tonight. We don't know. I mean, Iran gets to make that decision. The timing and the level of retaliation is purely an Iranian decision. But Netanyahu had to know that by attacking Iran the way he did, that he was going to push Iran to where they needed to retaliate, and this would take it to another level. Whether he believes that the United States would intervene, or he was trying to force the Americans to intervene, I don't know. The United States has indicated that it will not participate in offensive actions against the Iranians, that all they'll do is defend Israel from any Iranian missile attack. What happens when Hezbollah joins in the fight? What happens if Iran, the pro-Iranian militias in Iraq do? There's already indication that American bases have been attacked in Iraq, maybe as a precursor to a larger regional offensive by the axis of resistance. We're in a very, very dangerous situation right now, and it's all because of Benjamin Netanyahu's desire to hold on to political power at any cost.
What do you think will happen in the next several weeks because of the evil that Netanyahu has wrought?
If Iran retaliates on the level that it has indicated would be retaliation for such an attack, we could be looking at tens of thousands, even hundreds of thousands of lives lost. General war between Iran and Israel that could drag the region, drag the United States and maybe even Russia and China into it. Israel has indicated that if Iran strikes civilian targets, that it will hit Iran's nuclear infrastructure. And Iran, of course, would respond by hitting Israel's nuclear infrastructure, and the escalation would go from there. So we're looking at, the real possibility that densely populated urban areas, both in Israel, Iran, and elsewhere, Beirut, could be hit with very lethal conventional weapons. Again, on a scope and scale that we haven't seen. I mean, Ukraine doesn't the war in Ukraine definitely isn't done in this fashion. If you go to Kiev, the capital, people are partying, they're walking, they're shopping. You hardly know that there's a war. That won't be the case if there's a general conflict between Israel and Iran. Tehran, Isfahan, these cities will be hit. Tel Aviv, Haifa, these cities will be hit. And civilian targets will be hit. Civilians will pay a very heavy price.
Here's Hassan Nasrallah 2 days ago. Tell me what you think. Cut number 3.
The enemy and those behind the enemy must wait for our inevitable reaction. God willing, there is no discussion or controversy about this.
Does he mean what he says?
I believe he does, but again, he was very, non-descriptive in what he said, meaning that it's open to interpretation. Would he participate in a general retaliation with Iran, or would he hold off and strike at a time and place of his choosing? We have yet to see. Nasrallah has been a master of escalation management and not one to jump off the deep end precipitously, but I do think that he will take guidance from Iran's actions. Now, we know that former Defense Minister of Russia, Sergei Shoigu, has flown to Tehran. There seems to be a stream of Russian military aircraft flying to Iran, presumably delivering high-tech military equipment, maybe air defense systems, maybe surface-to-surface missile systems. We don't know. Could the Russians be asking the Iranians to delay, to tone things down, or are the Russians saying, we're here with you? We do know that Sergei Lavrov said about Israel's actions that Israel can't expect Russia to sit on the sidelines forever. Meaning
is that unusual? Is that unusual that Lavrov would say that, and that Shoigu would personally go to Tehran? Does that indicate to you a level of interest in the outcome of this dispute on the part of the Kremlin?
Absolutely. Well, first of all, we know that Russia and Iran have signed a defense agreement. The details of which haven't been made public, but Russia and Iran are operating on a different level altogether today than they were this time last year, this time 6 months ago, this time 3 months ago. They are strategically connected. Russia and Iran have signed a deal that connects St. Petersburg with the southern Iranian ports of Chabahar and Bandar Abbas, providing connectivity that can't be blocked by the United States. They're linked in terms of industrial cooperation, geopolitical cooperation, and Russia has indicated that it is a strategic ally of Iran. So I think Israel and the United States have to proceed with caution, because this could very well turn into a conflict that has Russia jumping in on the side of Iran, and that potentially puts Russia not only at odds with Israel. And there's Sergei Lavrov's statement, we're not going to sit on the sidelines forever.
Right.
I think Russia's already made decisions. They're off the sidelines, they're off the bench, they're on the field. Now the question is, what game does Israel want to play?
Does Iran have nuclear weapons, Scott?
I believe they do not. I believe they have the ability to enrich uranium of sufficient enrichment that could be used in a nuclear device. Then is it going to be a uranium weapon, a plutonium weapon? If it's a uranium weapon, then they've got to convert it into metal. They could make a simple gun design that's not that complex, but an implosion device requires work on high explosives that the Iranians haven't, to my best of my knowledge, completed yet. It's also something that the Iranians said that they weren't going to do. I'm more worried, to be honest, about a Pakistani weapon than I am about an Iranian weapon.
What is your worry about a Pakistani weapon, that the Pakistanis would deliver a nuclear weapon at a target that Iran picked?
I think if Israel uses nuclear weapons, which is something that, if there's a general war between Israel and Iran, it's very likely that Israel would use some sort of nuclear device. It would be necessary to, for instance, penetrate into the Firdos nuclear facility, which is underground. It can't be penetrated by any conventional weapons. Israel would have to use a nuclear penetrator to get to it. If Israel used a nuclear weapon against Iran, it's inevitable that an Islamic weapon will hit Israel. It's inevitable. I'm just trying to be as clear as I can be about this. It's inevitable that an Islamic weapon will hit Israel and probably destroy Israel. And the Pakistanis have made it clear that that weapon probably will have made in Pakistan on it. Whether the Pakistanis deliver it themselves or give it to Iran to deliver, that's a question for the future to decide. But Israel needs to know that there is no free pass. They don't get to use a nuclear weapon and nothing happens. Eventually, if Israel uses a nuclear weapon, Israel will be destroyed by nuclear weapons.
How about let's go back to the IDF and Hezbollah. The Wall Street Journal this morning, a cheerleader for Benjamin Netanyahu and a cheerleader for the destruction and genocide in Gaza, has a long piece reporting that the IDF is exhausted. They want to go back home. Their businesses are suffering. Their families are suffering. They're begging their leaders to beg Netanyahu's government not to pick a fight with the Hezbollah. Can the IDF alone defeat or diminish Hezbollah?
Well, diminish is a question. I think the IDF has the ability, if it engages in a full-scale war of attrition against Hezbollah, to inflict damage on Hezbollah. But I don't believe the IDF will win this war. I believe that Hezbollah will win the war of attrition, and it will be a strategic defeat for Israel. Israel prepared for such a conflict. They ran major exercises in 2021, 2022, but all of these exercises were predicated on Israel starting clean with a fresh military, all their resources focused on closing with and destroying the Hezbollah enemy. Israel is now entering this exhausted by over nearly 9 months of war in Gaza that has diminished it, depleted it. The troops are physically and morally exhausted, psychologically worn out. Their tanks no longer work. They don't have spare parts for their tanks. They're running out of ammunition. Their leadership is frayed. The morale of the men is low, and now you expect them to be thrown into battle against a highly trained fanatical force like Hezbollah that is ready for this fight, has been preparing for this fight for over a decade, and will take this fight to Israel. Israel thinks that this fight's going to be fought in southern Lebanon as they seek to push the Hezbollah back to the Litani River. This fight will be fought in Galilee as Hezbollah comes in with tens of thousands of highly trained troops who are prepared to take the fight to Israeli towns, Israeli villages. Israel can't win this fight. They will lose this fight.
Has the United States ordered the deployment of 5,000 Marines to the Middle East?
Yeah, but 4,000 or 5,000, yes.
What are they going to do? They're not going to engage in a ground war, are they?
Not a damn thing. No, 5,000 Marines is insufficient forces to do anything of significance on the ground, other than NEO operation, which is a rescue operation. If you have to pull Americans out of Israel or out of Lebanon, out of harm's way, the Marines have contingencies where they can go in, they can secure a zone, usually in a permissive environment, but in some cases a non-permissive environment, and get American citizens out of that and then withdraw them out of the area. But in terms of a sustained presence on the ground, a meaningful presence, 5,000 Marines simply isn't enough.
Here's Prime Minister Netanyahu, in my view, at his worst. when he was speaking before Congress, even attacking, if you will, the First Amendment. I'd like you to watch this and listen to it. Maybe you've seen it before. And then I'm going to ask you, he's a maniac. What is his real goal in all of this? But first, the clip.
For all we know, Iran is funding the anti-Israel protests that are going on right now outside this building. Not that many, but they're there, and throughout the city. Well, I have a message for these protesters. When the tyrants of Tehran, who hang gays from cranes and murder women for not covering their hair, are praising, promoting, and funding you, you have officially become Iran's useful idiots.
Three of those demonstrators are regular contributors to this show: Max Blumenthal, Aaron Matei, and Colonel Lawrence Wilkerson. I asked them, were you guys funded by Iran? There were 50 to 100,000 of you. Was there the slightest whiff of Iranian money funding you to go there? No, no, and no.
Yeah, no. Look, you don't have to agree. I happen to agree with, I'm good friends with Max and Aaron, and I know Colonel Wilkerson, and I agree with what they're demonstrating in support of. But you don't have to agree with them. If you're a representative of the United States of America, as all those people who are in the Congress applauding Benjamin Netanyahu, a foreigner, by the way, who was attacking Americans for carrying out their First Amendment rights of freedom of speech and freedom of assembly. If you're a member of Congress, your duty is to uphold and defend the Constitution against all enemies, foreign and domestic. And I would say that Benjamin Netanyahu, standing in the People's House, addressing Congress, condemning those Americans who are doing their duty as they saw fit, protected under the First Amendment, that he is the literal definition of an enemy of the United States of America, and yet they applauded him. It's disgusting behavior on the part of the United States Congress. You know, freedom of speech isn't about supporting the speech that you agree with. It's about supporting all speech, whether you agree with it or not, especially if you don't agree with it, because that's when it needs to be defended, because there's a temptation to say, shut it down, close them out, shut them up. No, you never shut them up. If you don't like what someone's saying, come up with better ideas, say it better, debate them, but don't shut them down. And Benjamin Netanyahu is an enemy of America, but even more so, every single one of those congressional representatives and senators who applauded that, they're enemies of America as well.
They're not representing the American people. They're not preserving, protecting, and defending the Constitution. One Republican, Thomas Massey, didn't show. 100 Democrats didn't show, even though many of them have voted to give Netanyahu whatever he wants. Where do you see this going? Could this war involve Russia and China in a physical way, with troops, with planes, with ships?
I don't believe so. I mean, there's always that possibility. You never know where something's going to go once it starts. The danger is that this could turn into a general war between Russia and Iran. If Russia starts providing Iran with military
equipment, a war between Russia and Iran.
I'm sorry, I mean between Israel and Iran.
Right.
If Russia has this agreement, it can't back away, meaning it will continue to support Iran. It won't allow Iran to be strategically defeated. If the United States has a similar agreement with Israel, where it won't allow Israel to be strategically defeated, we now have the potential of Russia and the United States facing off against each other in this regional way. Now, the United States and Russia have been doing so over Syria for over closing on 10 years, and we have deconfliction methodologies established where we talk to one another and we know how to avoid a conflict. But would we be able to do that if it involved Israel and Iran? It's just dangerous. We don't want to head in this direction where we have to ask that question. I prefer to know the answer, which is no, we're not going to allow that situation to devolve. But once you get into a general shooting war, you can't predict the outcome, and that's a very dangerous thing.
I want to switch gears for just a minute before we conclude, Scott. You'll know who this is and what he's crowing about. Chris, would you run cut number 1 and cut number 2 back to back, please?
jets are in our sky, and officially today you see them, and it's good that they came and we can use them.
We had hundreds of meetings and talks to strengthen the capabilities of our aviation, to strengthen the capabilities of our air defense system, of our defense forces. We often heard it is impossible as an answer, but we still made our ambition, our defensive need possible. Now this is reality, reality in our skies. F-16s are in Ukraine.
What value are those F-16s to Ukraine?
Propaganda value. It's important propaganda value. You see the Ukrainian president talking about it. We've seen 2 fly. Reports indicate that up to 10 may have been delivered. They seem to be configured in air-to-air mode with AMRAAM missiles, sort of longer-range missiles, shorter-range Sidewinder missiles, and then they have an Israeli infrared detection device pod put on there as well. So they appear to be in an air-to-air combat configuration. So if he says they've been used, it would be to patrol airspace in and around the airfields that they're at. 2 seem to fly over the city of Odessa, again, for morale purposes, to say, hey, we're here. But if they tangle with the Russians will shoot them down. And again, the F-16 needs pristine airfields. The Russians will find where these airfields are, and they will destroy them or damage them. And it's purely a propaganda ploy. I don't see.
How old are the F-16s, Scott?
Well, the ones that apparently that they have are Danish F-16s, and they could be approaching 4 decades, and they've been, they've gone through a life upgrade, a midlife upgrade, but their airframes are just too old right now. They can't take high stress maneuvers. You can't overload them with weapons and put them into a high G turn. The airframes, these are airplanes that these NATO countries gave up because they had passed their useful life expectancy. And, there may have been some tinkering with electronics and things of that nature, but these are not combat worthy aircraft. They wouldn't be allowed to fly in any NATO air force. And we gave them to the Ukrainians. And again, they're just there for propaganda purposes.
Scott Ritter, thank you very much, my dear friend. Oh, your
I think it's fair to say that the punishment that Iran will be handing out to the Israeli regime will be severe enough to make sure that the Israeli regime regrets carrying out the terror attack in Tehran. In other words, after the 2 sides have finished, the Israeli regime and the leadership of the army, the intelligence in Israel will come to the conclusion that murdering Martyr Haniyeh was a major mistake. And I think anywhere within the borders of Palestine is basically falls within the framework of a potential Iranian strike. I think that all foreigners should leave Palestine immediately. The Iranians have taken this very seriously. Not only has Iranian sovereignty been violated, not only has a major foreign figure or international figure been murdered, but also the Israeli regime has attacked Iran's honor and dignity by murdering a guest. So the Israeli regime should be prepared for the consequences, and the people residing in Palestine should also await the consequences, but preferably they should leave Palestine as swiftly as possible. The Iranians will definitely be faced with pressure from the collective West, and they will face challenges. The United States occupies parts of Syria, and of course, the occupation forces are still in Iraq in order to protect the Israeli regime and also to protect terrorists in Syria and potentially terrorists in Iraq. But Iran will overcome. Iran will ignore the pressure. Iran will ignore the political pressure, and Iran will overcome this coalition of Western countries that seek to protect the genocidal Israeli regime from an Iranian retaliation. And the retaliation will be much more significant than what we saw in April.
And we all know how I feel about we don't know what I stand. So, but anyway, that's what happened. I just wanted to share this with you. So, all right, let's get into our analysis here. So I'm going to approach this topic from mainly two main angles. One is economics, and the second one is geopolitical, forward political aspects of it. Now, if you consider that the retaliation of Iran against Israel, and in return, this is why I asked the question: are we going to be looking at an an all-out war? And if that happened, what's going to be happening from an economic perspective? Because you can't ignore the first thing, the first order of business Iran's going to do. What is, in your opinion, the first thing Iran's going to do if there is an all-out war? And again, I like to have your input into part of the conversation as we discuss. You know, one term will suffice for this. What's going to happen in your opinion? Yes, beside the age group in Lebanon. This is something else pertaining to economics. Think of energy. What will Iran do right away if there is an all-out war? Oh, you got it, Sam. Sam, you got it. Blockade. No, it was Sam right there. Right here. Sam, close the Strait of Hormuz. Absolutely. And if you know anything about the Strait of Hormuz, and I got a picture for you guys right here to show. If you know anything about the Strait of Hormuz, and we're not going to talk about the geography, we're going to talk about its strategic importance. Now, the Strait of Hormuz is considered one of the world, and I repeat this, one of the world's most economically important choke points. Yeah, in addition to the Red Sea, Strait of Hormuz is very, very important. So the Arabian Peninsula has the world's largest oil and gas reserves. So just consider this. For example, take Saudi Arabia. Saudi Arabia, one of the largest oil producer, just by itself accounts for about 16% of oil reserves that goes through that area. About 30%, 30% of the world liquefied gas and 25% of oil pass through the Strait of Hormuz. So, and if I recall, I did a private presentation because I am a speaker also, and I did that for a private audience. Back then, I argued there were about 11 million barrels of oil was shipped out of the Persian Gulf through the strait, just in that narrow, which is about, I think, 24 kilometers or something like that, representing 20% of oil trade worldwide. And in 2018, the last figure, a financial figure, showed that at that time, it was about, the cost for it was about $1.2 billion of oil passed through the Strait of Hormuz on a daily basis. So my opinion, from an economic perspective, that will be the first thing Iran's going to do. And the reason why, and as I'm showing you the map here, on the side of Iran went ahead and placed some undersea bombs that if the U.S. gets closer or any other, they will be activated. This is one of the key from an economic perspective that we're going to have to think. And when you consider, for example, the economy of Israel has already shrank by about 20% on an annualized terms. The shekel, the currency dropped. You know, the economy of the airports now are sort of, there are no flights to Israel. Major other airlines from Europe canceled all the flights. So just from an economic perspective, you see, and given that also for us here in the US, if we add this open war, our economy is already hit hard now. I don't know if you are aware, guys, of what just happened to the stock market this morning. You know, it dropped by about 1,000 points. It's a major. And this is why last time on the community tab, I posted for you the lies that our government is saying, oh, the economy is fine. It's a lie. We are in a deep recession here. We just don't want to admit it. So we won't rattle the rest of the world. Look at just the stock markets around the world today, how they operated. And all this also because of the fear that if Iran attacks Israel, which most likely it will, what is going to do to the economy. And this is why I want you guys to understand that the dimensions to any conflict, it's not limited only to its military aspects of it. It can touch us on other aspects as well, including the economy. So, and that is very, very important to understand. And this is why you have to consider also the dynamics that's taking place right now in the region. What am I referring to here? I'm referring to two main things. Is that Russia has already sent its intelligence agents to Yemen. One group went to Yemen, another group went to Iran. Yeah, as of this morning. And as a matter of fact, I do have the link for this, which I will post for you later on as I move forward into this. It just is so crucial for us to understand these dynamics, because the logical question you're going to ask yourself is, what are Russians intelligence officers going to both Iran and Yemen for? So it's worth considering, because and this is even what the US fears right now. Because what we are concerned about is we are concerned about the support that Russia is going to provide Iran, and via or through Iran is going to be providing through its allies, meaning Iran's allies. That is where the dynamics is going to be. I'm going to have to plug in this because I'm noticing my computer. Okay, let's hope it works. This is what's going to be happening. So the concern is that the U.S. intelligence community already believes that Russia has already sent its military intelligence officers. And those were, as I said, one group went to Yemen, the other group went to Russia, and as a matter of, to Iran. I'm sorry. And as a matter of fact, today Russia received Iran rather received Russia's top security official, and that's usually a message to other foreign ambassadors inside Iran. Why? It's because Russia will be sending Iran some fighter jets, about 24 to my knowledge. So this is significant because this doesn't happen in a vacuum. When you have, this is an old picture when Ibrahim Raisi was still alive, and this is a meeting between Ali Khamenei, the supreme leader of Iran, and the Russian president. It's recent. So this is what I'm saying. The concern now is how we're going to move forward into this. And this is what I'm going to be tackling from the geopolitical aspects of all this. So economics, you understand it's going to be a major, but it's the geopolitical aspects that's we're going to focus on. I had a chance to read up this yesterday, I think. Yeah, or the day before. I read some articles from overseas, not from here, because I know how the narrative here. When it comes down to something like this, I don't depend on the media here. Now, there is one article was, I think, by either the Times or the New York Times, one of those. But I corroborated the information, and it turns out to be true. And I will address this one as I move forward. So I had a chance to read an article by Matt Nasheed, who wrote this one here. There's some accuracy to it. There's some information was missing, And I'm assuming because the person didn't know the other side of the story, because that falls under the intelligence aspects of it. So, and the bottom line to it is that what is going to be happening from a geopolitical perspective, given that Iran now issued the statements that he will strike Israel inside. This is not about attacking Israel embassy in some other country. No. We're talking about the locations between Tel Aviv and another location on the east side of Israel. So Iran already mentioned this, and there is reason for that, because that's where some of the critical assets Israel has, they're going to be targeted. Because remember, the age group in Yemen already proved that the air defense of Israel ain't that competent. If they couldn't stop a drone, do you think they're gonna be able to stop an Iranian missiles like this one here? I don't think so. And this is why the U.S. had to go and send its asset there, but also declared we will stand with Israel. Well, as an American, I'm asking, well, wait a minute. What are we going dragging ourselves into another war? What are we going to be fighting on behalf of some other entity? I don't care who that entity is. Why? What's our interest into this? And let alone, we can't even fight. We couldn't even control the age group in the Red Sea, the Yemeni group. We couldn't control that. We couldn't defeat them. And you think we're gonna defeat Iran? It's ludicrous for us to be stating the statements. We stand with our ally Israel. Well, come on. Israel dug a hole for itself, and Israel won't be able to fight on its own. Mark my word on this, and I'm going to tell you why. So the whole idea of, for those who might not know what the background is for the statements of the Iran supreme leader Ali Khamenei, is because of the assassination of Ismail Haniyeh, who happens to be at that time on Iranian soil. He was in Tehran attending the inauguration of the new Iranian president, and he was targeted. So he was taken out along with the commander of Hezbollah, who was also attending. But the point is not about that. For Iran to react this, first of all, this one has two major dimensions. As an analyst, I have to explain these two dimensions, because we have to put things in perspective. One is the assassination of Ismail Haniyeh was another blow to the Iranian intelligence service, and the answer, in my opinion, is yes, because now it shows how penetrated the Iranian intelligence service. Second one has to do with the Israel announcements that it was through a missile. It was not. It was through a planted bomb. Now, if there is a planted bomb, what does it tell you? It tells you that it has to be some entities who've been involved in setting this up ahead of time. Let me get something here, guys, because I need to plug in this one. Otherwise, I'm going to run to an issue. Because if I don't do this, I'm seeing I don't know why, all of a sudden, my computer start to act. Allow. Okay, we're going to allow this one. All right, this one will stabilize it. Yeah. I always find it very weird when I talk about some sensitive issues, my computer or the connection starts to act weird. I tested the connection is fine. Everything's running fine. It's just weird. Anyway, let's continue our conversation. So what I said, it demonstrated two things, that what Israel's saying, that's one. And second is the intelligence service in Iran that is penetrated, because that's what it is. So and I'm not going to detail here about the plot in itself. That can be another live stream by itself. Suffice it to say that the bomb was planted in the residence where Ismail Haniyeh stayed. Which tells me what? Again, some high-ranking, yes, I will feel comfortable saying this, knowing I used to work in Washington, I understand this kind of dynamics within the intelligence structure. Some high-ranking officials were involved in this on behalf of foreign agencies, mainly the Mossad and the CIA. Straightforward, there is no ifs and buts. So, and as a matter of fact, Iran ended up arresting about 20 of them, including some high-ranking officials. So, and they have turned now the investigation to the IRGC, the Iranian Revolutionary Guard Corps. So that tells me right there, Iran needs to work on its intelligence structure, because it is bad. It's penetrated. So, and this is where this whole idea of and again, I'm not going to focus on this. I'm going to focus on what the retaliation of Iran is going to consist of. So, but I need you to know that his assassination, meaning Ismail Haniyeh, was not through a missile. It was through, and same with the. This is the during the ceremony, the funeral that is of the Hezbollah commander, top commander Fuad Shukr. So, and that was when Hassan Nasrallah gave a speech there. And it's very, very important to understand this dynamics, guys. Otherwise, things will not make sense to you why Iran is going to move into these directions now. Now, thinking about sort of how Iran go about this one. Of course, Iran, as I said, is going to retaliate. Now, will be Iran by itself? No, because you're going to be looking at other elements. To my knowledge and my understanding, when I say knowledge, I'm referring to my understanding, because I spent time in the Middle East dealing with understanding the role of these groups that I'm going to be mentioning. So I am aware of the groups that some of them you don't even hear about. It's just the way it is. So, and this is what it's known as the axis of resistance. Yeah, the term that is used in the region, West Asia or Middle East, is called axis of resistance. Now, this one, it includes Iran's groups that have been financed, supported since the revolution. It goes way back. So the ties are so strong. And this is where now Israel is going to have to be very, 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 very concerned. I'm going to share with you, let me show you first of all the map. What are we looking at here? Here is Iran. This is Iraq. Right here on the top is Syria. And in the green part here, that's the on the left of it, that's the Gaza Strip. So what are you going to be looking at? You're going to be looking at groups that are affiliated with Iran. So we'll start with the Gaza Strip. You have two main groups there. One of them is Hamas, of course, and second one is the Palestinian Islamic Jihad. Then you move into Iraq. In Iraq, you have about 4 groups. One of them is called Kataib Hezbollah. That's not a Hezbollah in Lebanon. That's another one. Kataib Hezbollah. Then there is another group, which a lot of people do not know, and I happen to be familiar with because when I spent time in Iraq, we had to deal with their attacks and so forth back then. It's called Asa'ib al-Haq. The fourth one is called Harakat al-Nujaba. And the fourth one is called the Popular Mobilization Forces. Then you go into another country, Lebanon. The main group is Hezbollah there. Then you go to Syria. Of course, what do you have in Syria? You have the whole government, because this is how it works. In Syria is also managed also by the groups in Lebanon. So, but within Syria, you have also the Fatimiyun group. Then you have the Zainabiyun brigades. So the Fatimiyun and Zainabiyun, those are two named Arabic. The Fatimiyun goes back to the Arabic history. The Zainabiyun, it goes also back to the Arabic history or the Arab history back then. So then you have another country, which is Yemen, and you all know which group is in Yemen. And this is why you need to understand, if we are to think about Iran's retaliation, it's not going to be just launched from Iran, which will be some You're also going to be looking at attacks from Yemen, attacks from Lebanon, and attacks from Syria and Iraq. So if you or your air defense system couldn't deal with just a simple drone, what the age group, the Houthis that launched back then, how do you anticipate to deal with missiles from different locations? The US is saying we're going to go and support and defend. What can we defend with the Patriot missile system that turns out to be useless? Look what the Russians are doing in Ukraine to the American system. The other thing is that Iran has developed, as by the way, when we took over one of the tanks back then in Lebanon, I think a week back, no, during the Iraq war also, Iran went ahead and reverse engineering what's called the Tau-2A missile. Those are anti-tanks. I have a picture for you here, guys. So Iran went ahead and developed this. So Iran now produces this. And I have the new version of it that is wireless, by the way. This is a wireless Tau missile anti-tank. But Iran already has those kind of missiles. So Israel will stand no chance. And if you know anything about our tanks, the Abraham tanks, you saw the images in Ukraine, what happened to them when Russia targeted those. So, and this is why, again, from a geopolitical aspect, you have to think in terms of, is the trip of the military intelligence officers of the Russian military apparatus to both Iran and Yemen coincidence? Or is it now for sure? Because remember, the Russian president, what he stated about 3 weeks ago, maybe you might need a war in the region to set the dust, to settle the dust once for all. And I think, even though I don't advocate for wars on all, but sometimes that's what's need to be done. It's the same argument I made sometimes regarding the Taiwan issue. At some point, China will have to demonstrate its military capabilities. That's how the West will understand. And look, Russia is doing it in Ukraine. That's my point. So when you think in terms of these movements, because here is the thing, if Iran doesn't do or doesn't follow through with what it says, Israel is not going to stop. The whole objective of Israel is to pull us into conducting the war on its behalf. And when I have my guest tomorrow, I'm going to be approaching this from a different angle altogether. It's someone who you spent almost 28 years in the Pentagon, so as policymaker inside the Pentagon. So it's very, very important to listen to a different perspective. And this is why the supreme leader of Iran, Ali Khamenei, when he stated, and I quote, "It is my country's duty to avenge Haniyeh after he was killed in the Iranian capital, Tehran, while attending the inauguration," end of quote. So to the Iranian supreme leader wants to justify, and rightly so. But also, you don't look at it just from this angle. You have to look at it also from the failure from within your own intelligence service. This is what happened when the US, and I was told at that time when I wrote the article, the government reached out to me and said, "Mr. O, we don't want you to disclose this one." I was like, why not? And I already talked to you about this one here, guys. When the Chinese were able to arrest a whole entire sleeping cell of 17 double agents. That tells the story right there. So you either have a good intelligence service or not. So Iran now is being exposed. That means it is prone to penetration. That's not good. This is why they're going to do what they're going to do. And this is why I'm saying, what's interesting is that the statements coming out of Tel Aviv regarding that it was because he was the U.S. official who disclosed that It was Israel's attack, basically. But Israel used the term missile attack. When it was no missile, it was a bomb that was planted there. So that's what it was, because that's how, based on what I digged into the last 48 hours to collaborate the information. And again, it makes perfect sense to me, again, because it just defies logic. If it was a missile, then the air defense system of Iran is useless. So what happened to the 300 missile system that Iran bought from Russia? It will be for this purpose. So, and this is why Iran went ahead and disclosed the arrest of 20 individuals, including senior intelligence officers, military officers, officials, and employees of the military-run apparatus in Iran, in Tehran. It's very, very important. Like I said last time, guys, remember this. Remember this. When it comes down to West Asia, the whole Middle East, the way it works for the intelligence service, especially the Mossad, they will have entities within countries like Iraq, countries like Syria, countries like Iran, you name it, Egypt, Libya, Morocco, Algeria, you name it. That's across the Muslim world, Jordan, you name it. And there are entities there, ends up supporting or providing information to those intelligence services. And I see the trend here in Iran as well. So, and this is why it's bad. It's bad for Iran not to be able to clamp down on this weakness within its intelligence services. So now you think about already what Hezbollah in Lebanon is doing. Well, it is pounding the north part of Israel. This is not in a retaliation to this one yet. It was one attack, particularly from Hezbollah towards this, but Hezbollah didn't even launch anything yet. You know, suffice it to say that this region in North Israel has been now sort of vacated. You know, it's deserted. They have never seen the exodus of people from the north part of Israel in more than 70 years, as they are witnessing today. Why? Because of Hezbollah attacks in the north. And this is why I need you to understand this concept of having, once again, I'm going to put this map here just to put it up for you. Understanding that the attacks will come from 4 locations: Iran, Iraq, Syria, and Gaza. Yeah, there is no way. There is no way. And for us, no way for Israel to manage all this, because the air defense system won't be able to sustain all this. Now, for us getting involved, we're going to get involved with Patriot missile systems. No, what the Russians have, and the Russians have already, by the way, delivered some hard assets, meaning weapons, to the age group in Yemen. I was made aware of that those weapons have already, those are mainly anti-ship. But who's to say it was something else with that weapons? Because this will serve also Russia's strategic vision. You know, it's now or never. That's how they look at it. Now or never. And this is why Iran, it's now puts itself in a position that it has to follow through. Otherwise, it's going to be very, 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 very problematic for Iran, credibility-wise, that is. There is another aspect we have to think about it. And this one has to do with, will Iran have to think about its losses if he moved forward with these particular aspects? Because the stakes are very high. Iran will have to consider this part of the calculation if it is to move forward. Otherwise, it's going to be suicide, basically. Because Israel is counting on the U.S. involvement. And I'm sure most of us Americans we're already wondering about the involvement of the U.S. in Ukraine. Why would they created that to begin with? We shouldn't be even considering that one, let alone getting involved into this. And this is one of the key that we're going to have to think about it. So the question that I'm going to ask you guys, because I like to have your answer, because I like to know your input. In your opinion, just think outside the box. In your opinion, does Iran, if you end up moving forward with this plan to retaliate and attack inside Israel, by the way, once again, this is not attacking some Israeli embassy somewhere. We're talking about inside. Does Iran have so much to lose against the U.S. and Israel? If yes or no, if you move forward with this attack. Let me see in a chat box what your answer is, because I like to know your input, guys. So let me check your answer here. It's not an easy situation. Oh, Lyman, thank you so much for your super sticker. Truly appreciate you. Oh, Sonia, Madalena, thank you so much for your super sticker. Truly appreciate you. And good to have you here in our community. Thank you so much, Sonia. Alamseen, once again, many thanks for your continued support. Alamseen, one of those that support the channel behind the scenes. So I'm very grateful, Alamseen. Thank you so much. All right, let me see your answer, guys. Please, yes or no, because that's all I'm interested in, because it's not easy to cover all this I just need to know your input. Francis Tango, thank you so much. What will happen if AF fall in Iran? No, it won't. I don't see that happen. I don't see that happening. Thank you, Francis. All right, let me see. Okay, let me see here what you guys have your answer. I know we got a lot of live people here. That's so hard to go through everything, but I am interested in your insights. I am very interested in knowing, because the idea of we think about what is Iran just going to retaliate. Remember, they also have to calculate the risk, and that's the smart thing to do. Like I said, you don't react emotionally. Look at what the Russian president is doing. You know how easy it will be for the Russian president to flatten the entire Ukraine in no time. In no time. But is it a smart thing to do? The same argument I will make about Iran. Because Iran also thinking in terms, and don't think, guys, don't think that Iran didn't consider this. Don't think that Iran is not considered this as a bait. Because the moment you get inside an open war, there is no easy to get out. I give you a quick example. The Iran-Iraq war. How long did it last? If you can type in the years in the chat box, guys. I just want to share this with you. I want you to tell me, how many years did the Iraq-Iran war lasted? Okay, the first answer, some of you say yes. Francis Tango, you say no. Sonia, you say no. Jim, Pasarotri, you say yes, too much to lose. That is true. You, Lyman, you say no. Rabia Borak, you say not at all. Born Fame, you say no. Truth Seeker, you say no. Peace Lover, no. Blondel Austin, no. John Smith, yes. Interesting. And the reason I ask those kind of questions, guys, for us as a community, because we wanted to see the thinking, and you see right here within our community, there are those who think this way, and there are those who think this way, and that's the right way to approach things. We can't all of us be thinking in the same way. No. And in similar situation like this is very, very crucial for us to understand. This is how important for us to consider these aspects of what if, and we can't just assume this is what's going to be how it's going to move forward. And this is, again, like I said earlier, you have to think in terms of the strategic calculations. The strategic calculations are very important. Iran tends to react not emotionally. They are very, I wrote a book about Iran. I had to tackle, believe it or not, part of their history into how they dealt with foreign enemies or outsiders. It's because if there is anything we've learned about history, it tells you about the country's behavior. It's the history that will be your best bet into providing you those kind of insights. And this is no different for Iran. It's going to have to calculate the risks versus the benefits. What is the benefit of attacking Israel? What are the risks of attacking Israel? So, and because we all remember, and of course wasn't disclosed openly, if you go back to April, what happened in April of this year again? Of course, because Iran retaliated by firing a barrage of missiles and drones at Israel. So, and the way it did it, Iran gave a warning to the U.S. Hey, we're gonna move forward with this. This is why I'm seeing it. What I'm seeing is for Iran to come openly through the supreme leader Ali Khamenei by saying we will strike. That means there was a conversation with the Russians behind the scenes. As to the Chinese, no, Iran will not go that route. Iran will go more with the Russians on this because they know where China stands on certain aspects of this. China does not want to get involved militarily. It's not that they can't, they just prefer not to. But when you look at the history of the US and Russia, it's slightly different than the history of the US versus China. So it makes more sense for Iran to go with Russia regarding this aspect. So this is why those higher stakes are sort of very, very interesting regarding the axis of resistance and how it's going to coordinate. It is my belief now, they are coordinating as we speak. This is not it's going to be simultaneous. And this is to the best of my understanding, how this kind of arrangements from this kind of groups. When I spent my time in the Middle East, we were dealing with all this to understand how the behavior of these groups are. And this is where they're going to be. Yeah. It's like when you look at what Hezbollah stated, what they stated, and I quote here, stated that we will retaliate against Israel for killing Shukr, and that is likely will participate in a joint attack with Iran. End of quote. That tells you the story right there. It's all clear. It's just a matter of when and how they intend to go about it. The how part, we already know. You got those 4 or 6 entities in those 4 countries: Lebanon, Yemen, Syria, Iraq. Then you add Iran, of course, the headquarters, if I may use the term. So and that's why it's going to move forward into this direction, and that's not going to be very, very pretty for Israel, as I argued in my Russia book, in my Iran book. I'm sorry, this one right here. Where is it? Yeah, right there. back then when I wrote this one. And the argument was that I made back then, Iran understands, remember, that was a few years ago. Things have changed for Iran. This is one thing about geopolitics. It never stayed the same, ever, ever. What happened last year will be different than what is today, and will be very different than what it will be next year. So the idea that the critics, as I argued back then, need to put to rest this kind of statements and this was within the context of the Iran nuclear program. And there are those critics back then who were saying, oh my gosh, Iran's going to dominate the world. And I was like, this is nonsense. So that's why I argued back then. I said, he needs to put to rest this nonsense statements as to Iran nuclear program is going to take over the world, or is going to wipe out Israel. No, ain't going to happen. Or take over the whole Middle East for that matter. No. Of course, the dynamics has changed now. The geopolitical landscape has shifted towards a more multipolar order than it used to be, where the U.S. has now no say into it. I mean, we look at it with the example of the age group in Yemen. They couldn't defeat them. Britain is useless. So, and now they're going to go defend Israel. Well, how many fronts can you? Did you know that if the U.S. and which, by the way, when I say the U.S., I am referring to the U.K. also. U.K. will be dragged into this, whether they like it or not. They are servants. They have no choice in the matter. So just think about it. If the U.S. and the U.K. now focus on a different front, what do you think is going to happen in the Red Sea? What do you think the Houthi is going to do with now the new weapons they just received from the Russians? So, and they might end up just shutting down the Red Sea altogether, in addition to the Strait of Hormuz. And we all know. So, but this is what I argued back then, and I said, while I understand Iran's sort of nuclear ambitions and growing geopolitical aspiration, reality suggests that there is a limit to Iran's aspirations. And one of them now is taking over the Middle East. It's nonsense. It's nonsense. No. Because the problem was, and still today to a degree, one of the key Iran's problem is internal, and it has to do with its economy that needs rebuilding. Remember the sanctions. So also you have to deal with the infrastructure that is in much need of an update. And of course, in a society that remains divided, whether to continue to live within a closed system or be opened up to the rest of the world. Those are issues that Iran can overlook, and they have to think about. There is no way. There is no way. So that's why I think it behooves us to be realistic as to, just because we heard the statement that says we will retaliate, this is what the Supreme Leader Ali Khamenei, we shouldn't take it right away. That means tomorrow the missiles will be launched at Tel Aviv. No. It doesn't work that way. So, and all this will make sense if I am to go back then as to why the two countries, Saudi Arabia and Israel, back then were opposing this agreement regarding the Iran nuclear program. They were the two main ones. Well, the case of Saudi Arabia has changed, of course. But they were opposing it for two main reasons. One is that Israel worried that, by the time you go this and lift the sanctions on Iran, it's going to pave the way for the latter to increase its military, meaning Iran's military and economic support for groups such as Hezbollah and the Houthis. That's what I wrote back then. It is happening today. And two, Saudi Arabia at that time fears the expansion of an Iranian sphere of influence that may decrease Saudi Arabia's religious dominance in the Muslim world. And yet I argued this is nonsense, even though I wrote it. And I followed up with, I don't subscribe to this notion that Iran post-nuclear agreements advances it, either its ideology or its religious dominance. Why? It's because Iran has no desire to dominate the Muslim world. It doesn't make any sense. Even before before this nuclear stuff, whatever. Remember the war in Iraq the invasion of Iraq, which we conducted in 2003. American foreign policy double standard on that aspect, the civil war that was in Syria, the upheavals that took place in Yemen, and the military coup that took place at that time in Egypt. So, and of course, the failed state of Libya, which we have contributed to. And all this, in my opinion, demonstrates that, these religious differences and so forth divide the Middle East into the religious term. This is why Iran is not interested in dominating, despite what you hear. What you need to know, as I argued back then and it applies today, is that Iran is communicating to the West that it has the capability and know-how to produce advanced systems through various means. This is your example right here, guys. And that is why Israel is hesitating to. It was just talks. Even for us, the US, we were just, I was aware of a plan back then. As I said, usually when we think about plan of attack or whatever, in the case of Iran, we got what we call the menu in the Pentagon. That's how it's done. So, and the first line of on that menu was a carpet bombing. You flatten to. We couldn't do it now. That was back then, when Iran didn't have those advanced missile systems, when Iran didn't have the Russian S-300 missile systems, which are very deadly accurate. And now they even have the 400 missile systems. So that plan is scrapped. It's gone. This is my point. We're going to have to think logically and pragmatically. You can't give in to emotions. And I know everybody's angry and all that stuff. Yeah, because the whole assassination of, for example, the guy, Ismail Haniyeh, on Iranian soil was useless. Unless he was serving as a bait. It's the only reason to that. No other justification for it, because it just didn't make any sense. Didn't make any sense, strategically speaking. Israel will not be able to fight on its own, because Israel created so many enemies now. So many. And we too have created many enemies now around the world. By supporting an agenda that goes against our if we are to say we stand for humanity, we stand for what's right, we stand for the ideals of freedom, so to speak, we stand for the right of everybody to exist. How come we're showing this double standard? You can't live like this forever. You can't. And we are reaching that point. We have reached that point. We're going down. We've been going down for the last decade plus. Down, 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 down. And for me, it's all started back in 2003 when we embarked on this invasion of Iraq. What for? And I knew right there, this is ill-conceived foreign policy. Has no justification, let alone the whole invasion itself was based on a lie. You can't behave like that on a world stage and assume the world's not gonna take notice. And now we are faced with the reality. Our economy is going down. The whole country, this country here. And I'm gonna do a video for you guys about the truth about the current economic state of the United States. That's just a reality we need to understand. So this is what I wanted to share with you. And by the way, there is one more point I need to address with you quickly here before I turn it over for your or answer your questions. What about some Arab worlds, some countries in the Muslim world, the likes of Jordan, the likes of Saudi Arabia, United Arab Emirates? What do you think they're gonna do? Why my screen is flickering here? I guess they don't want me to talk about this stuff. What do you think they're gonna do? Some of them have already thinking in terms of supporting Israel. Yeah. So when you think about Jordan, Saudi Arabia, United Arab Emirates, okay, it's hypocrisy at the highest order, or of the highest order. Those are hypocrites. Those are not Muslims. They call themselves Muslim. No, they're hypocrites. You know, because when you look at the map, guys, just look at this one here. Just look at the map. Look at where those countries are. Okay. And if Yemen gets involved, anything that has to be fired as far as missile will have to go through some airspace of sort, unless it goes through the Red Sea here. But even if it gets to the Red Sea, you get closer to Egypt. So even for Iraq, what Iraq is going to do? Will it let Iran's missiles cross over its airspace? Jordan is useless, even though Jordan and Saudi Arabia allowed the US and the UK to fly over their airspace or launch missiles against the age group. So it just shows you right there. They're saying one thing and doing another. So that's just something, food for thoughts. I'm not going to delve deeper into this. It's just food for thoughts, because you have to think about this now. Should it be an open war? How it's going to change the dynamics, because those countries are more concerned about their power, staying in power, than worrying about their population or the economy or what have you. Yeah, I always say get rid of them. So that's just my opinion. So, all right, guys, let me check out some answers from you here and some questions. I'm sorry.
Footage shows the moment the attack struck the Ain al-Assad air base, a proxy outpost of the U.S. and Allied occupation forces in Anbar province, western Iraq. The night of August 5, 2024, was marked by panic and a dangerous atmosphere as the attack drones and Katyusha rockets, fired by Iraqi resistance group responsible, caused fires and smoke to billow at the facility. Video shows the vehicles reportedly used to launch the rockets. The C-RAM system, rocket defenses, artillery and mortars, desperately repelled the attack, intercepting what appeared to be, but Al-Mayadeen reported that 3 explosions were heard and landed on the base itself. The shadow of uncertainty still hangs over the area, as casualties and damage remain shrouded in mystery. However, the U.S. Department of Defense confirmed on Tuesday morning that several of its soldiers were wounded in the attack, and said it was assessing the extent of the damage. Officials said at least 5 American personnel were seriously injured, and the casualty toll is still preliminary and subject to change. Meanwhile, the revolutionaries in Iraq have confirmed that they targeted the base with several missiles and drones that night, and said that they will use advanced capabilities and will continue until the last U.S. soldier leaves Iraq.
Well, Ukraine says that it is bulking up its air force with the help of F-16 fighter jets that the United States just sent them. But for those of us keeping track, the Biden administration promised us repeatedly that Ukraine would not get F-16s because Biden himself warned, when he knew what he was saying, that it would trigger World War III with Russia. So here is Ukrainian President Zelensky bragging about his shiny new F-16s, like a soccer mom bragging about her new Volvo. He says, yay, we can now build up our Air Force with our shiny new F-16s. And he said, we often heard the word impossible in response, but we made it possible, was our ambition, our defense need. And now it is a reality in our sky, F-16s in Ukraine. We ensured this. Now, how did he ensure this after being told no so many times by NATO countries?
Blackmail?
No, I mean, basically, it's the same way a toddler gets their cookie, by just being super annoying for long enough. And then you just acquiesce and say, take the cookie and go away. I know this from experience. But we were told NATO countries wouldn't do this. I can prove that to you. Here is a headline from early 2022, when the conflict with Russia began, with President Biden promising that this would not happen. This was in May of 2022. He said this all the way until January of 2023. The White House said it again. Biden says U.S. won't be providing F-16s to Ukraine. Look at the dateline on that, January 2023. And the U.S. said, by January of 2023, we were told no about the F-16s, but the U.S. had already by that time reversed course on other capabilities to Ukraine, like Abrams tanks, Patriot missile defense systems. And again, they were telling the American people they wouldn't do those weapons, but they ultimately did it. And here is when President Biden understood what he was saying, at least, and he told us that he was saying no to these weapons donations in early 2022 because that would mean World War III.
The idea that we're going to send in offensive equipment and have planes and tanks and trains going in with American pilots and American crews, just understand, and don't kid yourself, no matter what you all say, that's called World War III, okay?
So now that the president doesn't understand this anymore, who is pulling the strings? Like, oh, he doesn't know anything. So let's get him those F-16s anyway, because he's out to lunch, clearly. Who's doing this?
Right.
Clearly, it's not President Biden.
No, it's the deep state. It's the permanent government. It's the military industrial complex at the Pentagon that's running the White House. It's not Kamala Harris. She's like the figurehead of it. He wasn't running things to begin with. Now, who's signing these executive orders? Who's allowing this? I mean, this should trouble all Americans right now. It's infuriating.
Yes, it is. And also, will it help Ukraine? Do they even know what to do with these F-16s? A U.S. official told the New York Times that about half a dozen pilots were conducting test flights on as many jets in uncontested, in quotes, Ukrainian space. He said that Ukrainian pilots were getting acclimated to operations on a small scale and had not yet engaged the Russians. In other words, they haven't flown inside Russia yet. They're just sort of taking them for test drives, joyrides, just fooling around.
Yeah, they're really no different than a Cessna 172 or anything, or a drone.
Surely.
It's kind of the exact same thing. So just climb in and
I'm sure.
fly it.
Right. These guys played Afterburner at the arcade.
Yeah.
They know how to fly an F-16.
Yeah.
Right? They got it.
But even if they don't, which we know that they don't, and we covered in the Der Spiegel about a year ago, there were Ukrainian military saying they give us these manuals, instruction manuals that are in English. We don't really understand them. We get short periods of training and then we're expected to use that. So even if they, which is probably true, they probably don't, but they most likely have NATO forces who will fly them for them. But the Times said, well, mostly though, this is just to make them feel better because they're losing to Russia so badly. This is from the New York Times. At the very least, the arrival of these jets will bolster Ukrainians' morale, which has been dampened by months of slow but steady Russian advances on the battlefield and devastating attacks on the country's power grid. So again, we're infantilizing Ukraine. Like, just take the cookie, take some toys. Maybe you don't know what to do with it, but just, get out of here. We're treating them like children to make them feel better. Here's some dangerous toys. Since you've asked enough times.
When I'm feeling down, I wish somebody would give me a fighter jet. I mean, I would even settle for an A-10 Warthog. Like, it doesn't even have to be one of the new ones. Even one of the older models, I would be fine.
Yeah.
Like, I was ready to throw in the towel and go home to my family, but now that the Jets are here, I'm staying.
I feel better.
And as if they're going to survive. I mean, how long until Putin destroys them anyway?
Oh, I have an answer to that.
Okay,
good question.
Because they've been hitting all of these NATO depots and destroying munitions that are arriving that we are spending billions of dollars to supply. You think Putin's going to allow friggin' F-16s to sit on a tarmac for more than 10 seconds?
Right. Okay. Well, let's look at what Russia is going to do. But first, again, I want to look at Zelensky for a second because we're treating them like children. I just want to remind you that President Biden, what's the date on this? Just last year promised us that Zelensky would not use these in Russia. This promise may have even involved some pinkies. So we're probably good. It was like my word is my bond level stuff. Here is how President Biden put it at the time. U.S. President Joe Biden said Sunday that he had flat assurance from Zelensky that he would not use these F-16s to go into Russian territory. So they promised us. They just want to, take them on some joyrides. They're not going to use this inside of Russia. Maybe Zelensky, though, will use his acting chops and make a Ukrainian Top Gun, and then they can bolster military enrollment. That's one way, maybe, since he pinky promised. Last year, Michael Tracy said this on X about this mission creep and the media's complicity. He said the Biden administration's patterns of evolution on sending weapon systems to Ukraine they previously pledged not to send, such as these F-16s, could also be described as a pattern of false assurances and deceit. But you will not see the media describing it as such. And instead, he's absolutely right. Look at the media headlines about these F-16s today. If you read them in totality, it's like, oh, they're long awaited. Finally, they're here. They are gaslighting their readers, pretending that we always wanted this for Ukraine, only we didn't. So back to your question, Clayton, what will Russia do to this? Well, here is what they said today. They say, they will destroy them. They will ultimately be destroyed. Here's what Russian weapons maker Rostec said about the F-16s. That, I remind you, will cost American taxpayers billions. This was, again, Rostec's statement. If you look at the specifications of the U.S.-made aircraft, the conclusion is unambiguous. It is not a rival to the Su-35S, much less the Su-57. These are the fighter jets that Russia flies. They say in a head-on air combat, our jets are superior to the U.S. fighter jets. The F-16 is not the newest jet, but this is no reason to rejoice and relax. The jet can carry advanced missile systems and can cause a lot of problems. Nevertheless, they, as the rest of Western equipment, will face the same end: destruction. So that should not make us feel awesome for sending those things that we know Russia has a pattern of just blowing up as soon as they land. And so will Western leaders waste any more money and lives because someone will be near them when they are either in them or near them when they are blown up. And are we pretty stoked about that for pacifying the toddler fit that Zelensky has been throwing for 3 years because he's got his new toys? I don't know. We'll see. But now Zelensky says that, look, the West is just too afraid of escalating conflict with Russia. But he says, we're going to help them get over that. Look at this quote. He says, Western nations are always concerned about possible escalation. We're fighting against that. We'll work on them. In other words, they don't want to start war, but we're going to talk them into it. We're just warming them up to the idea of a war with Russia. Anyone who wants de-escalation and peace talks, we'll talk them out of that. Don't worry. We're working on that. So that's Zelensky wants you to want a war with Russia. Stop this peace talks. Give us the weapons. That's the update on the war in Ukraine. Let us know how you feel about that, especially on a day when the American economy is tanking because politicians pervert our economy with unnatural market forces and send all of our money overseas to support foreign wars. But you're going to love it. You want it. You just don't know you want it. That is
Monday, as it's being called right now, getting close to the market close here. The Dow tumbling 1,000 points. S&P 500, worst day since 2022. This global market sell-off right now. It's likely we are entering this World War III moment in full swing. Massive drop in stock markets around the world. Iran announcing it's about to attack Israel, which could come at any moment. So we're monitoring that. Japan's stock market is the most affected with a drop of about 10%. So Japan imploding. We'll talk more about Japan in a second, how this is so tied to the US dollar. You want to pay attention to this. Turkish stock market plunging by 7%. Taiwan's stock market also had worst day in 57 years in Taiwan. NASDAQ plummeting also. Here's how Fox Business reported this. Breaking recession fears. Watch.
History in the making.
Of what some would call history in the making.
Don't say that. We have never been down 1,000 points ever, not even intraday on the NASDAQ.
Is that true?
That is true.
Okay. Down 6% right from the get-go. This is heavy big tech. Here we go. Look at them go down. Microsoft is down $20. That's 5%. Alphabet, 5%. Meta, 6%. Amazon, 6%. Apple, 9% down. Let's pull out Apple. This is interesting. A question.
Yeah, guys, and also think about the banks, right? As this is all rigged, they've told us that they don't have enough money to cover the losses.
Yes.
Right. We know this from the FDIC, right?
Yeah.
The Federal Deposit Insurance Commission, right? We know that they don't have the money in the banks. So you want to go get cash out of your bank? Good luck. They will tell you to come back. So I've seen a couple of our friends online today saying, get your money out of the banks. Mm-hmm. Well, good luck with that, because you're not going to be able to get it. You're not going to be able to get your money out of the banks. And the money, if they do use your money, will be to bail in themselves because of this disaster that we're sitting on right now. Not a bailout. They will be bailing in using your money, which they approved. The government signed a law allowing them to bail in your money to get them out of this quagmire right now. So, I mean, think about that. You've got money in the bank, your hard-earned dollars sitting there, and you think, oh, this is protected by the Federal Deposit Insurance Commission. Great. It's not. Even if they tell you it's protected up to $250,000 for your deposits, where do they have all of that money? They don't. They don't have that money to cover those debts.
No, it's less than 4% of the money in our economy exists in paper form.
Right.
We've known this. We've been talking about this for years now.
Well, we've been warning for months that this was coming. This specific moment was coming. And here we are. Welcome to Black Monday, the largest market crash since COVID lockdowns. Of course, sent the markets into massive sell-off. We are sitting on a precipice of a global financial meltdown right now. And of course, this is all coming right before the 2024 election. It's shocking, I know. They want to control the money system. They want to control the financial system. What better way to do that than to lock everything down, keep you from like pulling your money out of the financial system? So, here's the front page of the Wall Street Journal just a few minutes ago. Dow sinks 700 points. Global sell-off intensifies. There are a couple of big parts of the story. Employment, the U.S. dollar, commercial real estate loans all coming due. No one wants to refinance these commercial real estate loans right now into higher interest rates. They've had these 5-year adjustable mortgages. And so that's why all of these office buildings are mostly empty. They're like, well, okay, 40% of our office space is now empty. Are we going to refinance an office building that no one's coming to into a higher interest rate? Again, we've been warning about this for months, and now many of these are coming due right now. Panic also setting in for Japan. Did you want to say something?
Well, I mean, let's just think about the lies that we're told about Wall Street when we're watching American football games and things like that. And we say, and invest in Fidelity, max out your 401k, max out your IRA. So the people who have followed that advice have seen the rug slip out from under them now on a regular basis. Now, it used to be that economists would say, well, put your money in the market, in the financial market, and it's not timing the market, it's time in the market. But we'll see a major market correction every 10 years. That's what we've been told to expect. Well, now we're seeing them every 5 years. And again, economists who are honest have been warning about this. One of my favorite is Harry Dent, who says we're no longer on a 10-year dump cycle, which it takes 10 years to recover what you lose in those crashes. So
Right.
anyone who has been partnering with the government to invest in the stock market continues to lose, but they keep pushing this crap at you. Again, every time there's an Olympics or a Super Bowl, they max out all that money to tell you to partner with the government to invest in the stock market, and you just keep taking it up the butt if you do that now on a more regular basis.
Right. And the Harry Dent's point is great because everyone's like, oh, well, yeah, all my 401k recovered after 10 years of a recession.
But
After
that
10
means
years.
you didn't gain anything.
Yeah. So in 10 years, you mean you just like had your money sitting there waiting for it to carve back? That's 10 years of wasted time.
But you cannot do that if we are going to be on an every 5-year recession, every 5-year stock market crash. And again, why do we do that? Because of government perversion, because we print more money than we use more money than we have. So we print it. And we also invest heavily in foreign wars instead of our domestic production. That's literally it. It's honest and it's true. And nobody will say that other than a few economists who are honest who will get made fun of.
Almost no one will talk about that, like where this money is going to fight foreign wars right now. They won't talk about the root cause. They're also not talking about what's happening in Japan. And Japan, of course, over the last 24 hours, they've seen their worst decline since 1987. As we reported on this show a few months ago, Japan were sort of bullied into buying up a lot of U.S. debt. They were going to unload a lot of U.S. treasuries, and Jerome Powell, the Fed, basically said, "Please don't do that. Please don't do that. We'll give you, we'll give you support in other ways, but please don't dump U.S. treasuries. It'll really send things into a free fall." Well, guess what? Japan right now is in a world of hurt. They are the largest holder of U.S. treasuries. They wanted to start dumping U.S. debt last year, but of course, Powell went in and said, "Don't do it. Don't now." And now Japan raising interest rates. Every other country slashing interest rates. They're raising interest rates because the yen is circling the toilet. So they needed to do something. Well, guess what? When you raise interest rates to help the yen, that hurts the US dollar. See how this works? So we're going to talk more about Japan later in this week. I'm working on a full report right now about Asia because that is really a major piece of this story. But since at least 2023, speculators borrowed money in Japan at near zero interest rates, and then they converted their borrowed yen into US dollars. And that's not going to work. That's a recipe for disaster. It's like robbing Peter to pay Paul, right? Was it robbing Peter to pay Paul? Something like that. So this has driven the yen into the toilet, a total disaster. Now something happened which triggered overnight the Sam Rule recession indicator. So everyone wants to start, are we in a recession? The Biden administration changed the definition of what a recession is, and they even locked the Wikipedia page about recession, so you can't go in and make edits. Isn't that amazing? Like the Biden administration is like, you know what? Okay, we're in a recession. We'll just change the definition of recession, and then we'll have our powers that be lock the Wikipedia page so no one can actually make edits to the Wikipedia page. I love it. Anyway, the SAM rule, recession indicator. You want to talk about this? This is really fascinating because we had it in the newsletter this morning. A lot of people don't know what this is, but I think to our audience, maybe to the layperson, it's a really important indicator.
So it's when a 3-month average drops by 0.5%. So unemployment right now, the 3-month average is, 4.1%. At this time last year, it was in the 3.5% range. So when unemployment drops by at least 0.5 percentage point from the previous time last year, that is an indicator since the 1970s that has been an indicator of a coming recession, if not depression. Now, something that, again, we like to platform economists who are honest about this. I can mention a few: Harry Dent, Carol Roth, Peter St. Onge. One thing that Peter St. Onge said just this morning is that only normies don't think we've been in a recession. Regular people who live in the real world understand that we felt like we've been in a depression for months and months. It's just normies in the media who pretend this is brand new information, just to quote Phoebe from Friends. That is brand new information.
Just like figuring out Biden has dementia. What?
Yeah.
We had to wait for a CNN debate to learn this information?
Yeah.
You didn't know that Biden has dementia? Oh my God.
No.
Yeah. We just found this out.
Right. Shocked. I'm shocked.
I've just been sitting here counting all this money I have because what you're saying, the dollar crashed too. I don't understand.
You need to get out of your Scrooge McDuck swimming pool and take a look around you. Read the room.
Spitting coins while you swim on a backstroke in this. So the SAM rule has a 100% accuracy rate for recession. predicting recession. But the biggest part of this is employment. Okay, so that's part of the Sam rule, this employment problem right now. And the biggest piece that no one's talking about, because they won't talk about it in the mainstream media, God bless this individual for actually mentioning it, though I can't believe he did, is illegal immigrants taking American jobs. So Americans losing their jobs over here and then being replaced by illegal immigrants. That's the real story here on the employment crisis. Watch.
What about a recession? Are we headed to recession?
I believe we are. And Stuart, it's been the consumer. The consumer drives 70% of the market, and the consumer has been pushed to the brink, and we're starting to see that. Now, there's been this false belief that the strength of the employment market, that it had to do with the amount of employees that are being hired. What is in reality is that 1.2 million Americans, U.S. citizens, lost their jobs, which were replaced by 1.3 million foreign-born or illegal immigrants. That is U.S. labor statistics. That shows that the labor market was never as strong as it was, and a lot of the new jobs being created by part-time workers, it's never been as strong as it was. Now you're going to see layoffs, and there's going to be more carnage in the future, leading us to a deeper recession.
So, okay, yeah, a number of factors here, right? You have these overinflated reliance on 7 big tech companies, Magnificent Seven, and you have this over-reliance on what is NVIDIA doing, what is Google doing, what is Alphabet doing, what is Apple doing, all of that.
Right. We talked about the tech job layoffs that have been over the last 6 months, just 2 weeks ago. Yes.
And then you have an employment piece of this, which they don't want to talk about. Americans losing their jobs, being replaced by illegal immigrants. This is a big piece of it. And yes, I see people in the chat saying, why don't we know about this? Do you think the mainstream media is going to report? A Biden mainstream media right now, a corporate media is going to report and tell you the truth about the employment picture in the United States? They are not.
No,
They're
independent media has been, though. That's why I am not shocked today.
Yeah, I know. I'm not surprised at all about this. And if you understand Japan, again, deeper connections there in the history with the U.S. Treasury and the reliance on U.S. dollars and U.S. debt, that is a big, big piece of it. Go ahead, Philip.
Oh, sorry. I was going to say that one of the things, yeah, with the dollar and like why the stock market is kind of going down with it is because these people that were borrowing against the yen, that were borrowing yen, were actually investing that in the stock market. And now these margin calls have come, and with the interest rates up, they have less money. They have to sell everything off basically to make the money to pay back the what they did. So it's just like it's like a big Ponzi scheme. I only know that because of Reddit. Like I hadn't heard that anywhere else. You just won't see it. Yeah,
exactly. So borrowing, converting your yen to US dollars, then buying the NASDAQ 100, and then these margin call Monday hits, and you have to pay it back. Boom. Right. I mean, this is a big piece of it, but not the only piece.
And so interesting that so many trading platforms had outages or shortages or some kind of small crash today. Like, oh, you can't sell right now with the rest of who can sell? Not you. Right. Yeah. So that's another piece of it that we will continue it to unfold before us. And I'm sure we'll see congressional hearings about how that happened. Why that happened? Were we prepped for it by the outage 2 weeks ago that affected the airline industry and the banks? It seems like suspicious timing.
Well, I mean, yeah, it's again, how it's rigged, right? Of course it's rigged. I saw, what do I say? Someone coming in the chat here. Yeah. Anyway, there's a couple of people here who are saying Steve Sarsic says that 1929 all over again. A lot of people who were ready and planned for this. We've been, again, covering this on the show for months. This shouldn't come as a surprise to any of you guys who are subscribed to our channel here and who watch us on a regular basis. Donald Trump posting this on Truth Social just a few minutes ago, saying Japan down 12%, India down 6%, Germany way down also, U.S. really bad. This is a preview of the world markets without Donald J. Trump in the White House. None of this happens if Trump is in. Kamala and the markets don't go together. She'll destroy the markets. She's in power now, and look at what is happening. 1 week of the fake media saying better polls and you get a market crash. The legendary Howard Lutnick.
Okay, but I do want to push him a little bit on this because he is the one who instigated the first rounds of COVID stimulus, which was a massive wealth transfer. Would have not been necessary had we actually followed science on COVID. So that began the last recession around COVID. So, I think that there's I don't want to have false idolatry here, like one person has the answer to this when clearly it's a systemic problem.
Clearly. And, but markets are moved right now by some of the horse trading right now. Is Trump going to be president? Is Kamala going to be president? And all of these polls over the past few weeks and all of this effusive love from the mainstream media, the corporate media, that's like, Kamala's our girl, right? That has now moved some of these indicators, and the odds of Trump becoming president have declined on the odds betting. And that has also spooked markets. So take that for that's what they're calling it, the Kamala crash today. So people are saying online, oh, it's the Kamala crash. Okay. So, obviously politics back and forth here. Donald Trump, Kamala Harris playing games with this right now. But, Kamala Harris, I think she's really strong on the economy. And she was just asked, how will she handle inflation? How will she handle the sort of stagnation in the United States? Consumers are really feeling the punch right now on prices. How are you going to fix it if you become president of the United States? I think she's great with this answer.
What else are you going to do to fix this problem with inflation?
All right, thank you. Well, let's start with this. Prices have gone up, and families and individuals are dealing with the realities of that bread costs more, that gas costs more. And we have to understand what that means. That's about the cost of living going up. That's about having to stress and stretch limited resources. That's about a source of stress for families that is not only economic, but is on a daily level, something that is a heavy weight to carry. So it is something that we take very seriously, very seriously. And we know from the history of this issue in the United States that when you see these prices go up, it has a direct impact on the quality of life for all people in our country. So it's a big issue, and we take it seriously. And it is a priority, therefore.
Okay, they're going to take it seriously and make it a priority.
She just mansplained, like she mansplained the question. Like, what are you going to do to fix inflation? I'm going to exhaustively define it for you. And then this is happening.
Yeah, exactly. Do you feel better about it? That's what's going on right now. So
helpful.
Yeah, I mean, protect your families right now. And again, if you've got all of your eggs in U.S. dollars in U.S. banks, please, we've been warning you for like a year and a half, 2 years now on this show. Protect your families. Protect your families.
Yeah. Look at what an asset is. What is an asset? Usually not something that you partner with the government to invest in.
Yeah.
That's just, what is a real asset? So, okay.
And I mentioned
Kofi, follow me.